I beg to remind honorable members that when the House rose, the question was that the Appropriation 2018-2019 bill be read a second time. Honorable Member for Castries Southeast, may I take this opportunity before you to deal with a matter, and may I call on the member for Castries Central?
Mr. Speaker, I gather that you're referring to the point of order, rather, that the member for Castries East rose earlier. Am I correct, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, Honorable Member.
I have received the transcript from the staff, and I am happy to withdraw the comment that I made on the premise that I could have said it differently. What I wanted to say, Mr. Speaker, was that I wanted to assure the House that our government has, in fact, called for the uplifting of the embargo on Cuba at the United Nations. We have done so whilst we've been in office. That is consistent with our foreign policy, and that we will continue to do so. I wanted to make that very clear to the House. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member, for at least rising and accepting and so withdrawing. Thank you very much. Honorable Member for Castries Office.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my support to this appropriation bill presented so well by the Honorable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are accustomed in this House, when it comes to these bills, to listen to 3, 4, 5, and I've heard as much as 6 hours of budget presentation by prime ministers. Some people are long on talk, but short on action. But this is an action-oriented budget, and I compliment the Prime Minister for making his presentation in such a short period of time. As I begin, Mr. Speaker, may I take this time to express my gratitude to God, my family, and especially my constituency for giving me this opportunity to stand in this honorable House and to represent them and the beloved people of St. Lucia. I need to single out among the persons, especially my wife, because, Mr. Speaker, you would know the amount of attacks that I have come under since I entered the political arena. The members of my family. And Mr. Speaker, I heard a member's other side, before any little thing is said, they start crying victimization and this and that. But Mr. Speaker, I will deal with some of these issues because in this country, and I agree with the honorable member for Babono, if what we are going to say is not truthful, why say it? You know, Mr. Speaker, a lot of things have just been branded all over the place. But I thank the people of Castries Southeast because every attempt was made by the previous government, and they did not just make the attempts, They stated it, Mr. Speaker, that they would do whatever it takes to see to it that I'm not in this honorable house. And they failed. But you see, Mr. Speaker, going to what the Prime Minister presented, the Prime Minister on this side is one person. He does not have multiple personalities. The Prime Minister on this side is not a fake, not a pretender. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that based on the contents of this budget and my interactions with the Prime Minister, that he truly loves the people of St. Lucia. I've had the opportunity to interact with all the persons from Sir John, Dr. Anthony, Dr. Lewis, Honorable Stevenson King, and now the present Prime Minister. I've had the opportunity to interact at a level with every one of these persons who have served in the highest office in this land. And I know a fake when I see one. And I'm not saying that the others were fake, but I'm telling you that this Prime Minister in St. Lucia is a man of great compassion. He's a leader who understands that he wants better for the people. Now his dreams for St. Lucia is big. And I see some members opposite have a problem with that. Who says St. Lucia can be all that? So who says St. Lucia cannot be all what we are dreaming that St. Lucia can be? After all, we tell our young people, our children, to aspire for the highest levels. Why can't we bring this country to a level that is above what some people can dream? And because some people cannot dream, because they have no vision, they have to appoint a vision commission to give them a vision. But the good book tells us, Mr. Speaker, where there is no vision, the people perish. And that is why for the last 15 years of the reign of the St. Lucia Labour Party, St. Lucia was perishing. Because they only realized very late in the third term in government that they had no vision, and they put a vision commission to try and give them a vision. I know. I could sit. I've said enough to take care of everything that was said on the other side. He is willing to try new things, and this budget is a prime example. Try new things. You see, you cannot do the same thing all the time and expect a different result. And that's what the Labour Party did for the last 15 years. Just think for a moment, Mr. Speaker. If a quarter of the plans of the United Workers' Party was to materialize during this term in office, what a change we would see in the landscape of St. Lucia. A change for the better. Now, they have some words I'm reluctant to use, because every word the Labour Party touches, they destroy. They came with transparency and accountability. Nobody don't want to use that word in St. Lucia again. They came with better days. You have to avoid, you have to find other words to use instead of better. Because there is a way, there is something about the Labour Party that destroys everything that they touch. And imagine words that are well-meaning in the dictionary is destroyed by the Labour Party once they use it. They came with jobs, jobs, and more jobs. They came with immediately, Mr. Speaker. 100 million immediately. And they said, well, immediately could mean a number of times.
So we need a new dictionary.
So the Labour Party has their own dictionary and meaning. Now we are accused, and I heard them, and I pay attention. I pay attention. That this budget is for foreigners, friends, and family. And I say to them, I agree. This budget is for foreigners, friends, and family, because on this side of the house, we welcome every foreigner who comes to St. Lucia. The tourist dollars are welcome in St. Lucia. The foreign investors are welcome. So is that a government for foreigners? Of course. It's in our manifesto. Friends, all St. Lucians, both here and abroad, are our friends. Our neighboring countries are our friends. So what is this budget for? Friends and then family. So let's talk about it. We are all children of one heavenly Father. So we are family. Are we not family? So use whichever term you want to describe. This budget is for everyone. Foreigners, friends, and family. And what did we say in our manifesto? That we are going to make this country a country that welcomes everyone, that offers the best place to live, the best place to work, and the best place to visit. So, of course, the Prime Minister must prepare a budget that is for foreigners, friends, and family, because we are one big family in St. Lucia. And that includes the opposition. That includes the opposition. Of course, even though he said he doesn't want time from me, but that's all right. That's all right. But you see, when family is going wrong, when families are going wrong, you have to point it out to them. If you love family, you have to point out to family when they are going wrong. But you see, you have to, is one thing I learned in my life, is you have to practice what you preach. You cannot be preaching one thing and doing something else, and then, so you want to tell me, like the preachers that say, do as I say, but don't do as I do. Because you've had 15 out of the last 20 years to implement the ideas that you want to give us. All of them failed. So, Mr. Speaker, they spoke about the economic and social review. Now, I will tell you something. Everybody can read, but people process what they read differently and they interpret it differently. So growth on page 2, it highlights the growth that took place. Let us consider the SLP building stimulus. You gave a building stimulus when you introduced VAT. Go back to the Bank of St. Lucia and find out who benefited from that building stimulus. Because when a certain government is in office, there are certain people who must get the true value of what happens in government. They must. They must. So on the World Cup, they got value. And the record is there. You can go and you can see it cost us over $45 million, the stimulus package that was offered. You know what happened with it? Find out. Only 2 persons really benefited from it. Only 2. And you know what they did? Some of them stockpiled. Piles of material. They bought at the reduced price under the stimulus, and waited for when the stimulus ended to raise the price on the people. You see, the difference with the United Workers' Party is when we gave 2.5% reduction in the VAT, it does not discriminate against anybody. It is for everyone. Foreigners, friends, and family. All St. Lucians. I will come to the 150. Let him talk. I will come to the 150. So, if you want a few lessons in economic growth, let us go to page 3 of the document. Page 3 of the Social and Economic Review. Now, I will tell you, honorable member, you may know about altitude. You may know about altitude. But you see, altitude does not always generate wealth. Not everybody knows how to generate wealth. Some people know how to spend the hard-earned money of other people, but they don't know how to earn money. So let me give you a few lessons. Page 3. It starts with the Japanese economy. And hear what it says. Japan's economic growth accelerated to 1.8% in 2017, led by a rapid expansion in domestic demand. Now I need to explain that to you. So when you said that we brought in the companies, the Headquarters Company Act, and you say that the Headquarters Act is what caused us to be on the blacklist. A member opposite said that. But I come into his 14-note record. But in the meantime, you know what happened? Consumption is what grows the economy. And the Japanese knows that. Now, I'm giving you a lesson that I want you to understand. I will show you every one of the countries that grew, that in the policies of this United Workers' Party government, you will see an aspect of that being implemented by the United Workers' Party government. We go to China. Same page 3. Growth in China continued to be resilient with the drivers of the activity shifting away from state-led investment. Now I heard them on the other side. Oh, where are all the big capital projects? You don't know that growth does not have to be led only by government capital expenditure. So China, in growing its economy, so understand this. So China, in growing its economy, was able to allow private sector to lead the charge in the development. So, let's see what happened under the Unite. You want to know what we did? We reduced the VAT by 15%, by 2.5% of the 15. Now, I'm not playing games with numbers. I'm a straightforward man. My maths is not like your maths. You all do a special maths. So, this 2.5% savings was re-injected by the private sector into the economy that spurred the growth that you cannot understand how the economy could have grown by 2.5%. So what did we reduce the VAT by? 2.5%. What did the economy grow by? Go and do the maths. Go and do the maths. Go and do the maths.
Honorable members, honorable members.
Go and do the maths.
Honorable members. Honorable members. I know that I have no issue if you're back and forth. I'm not going to get involved, but just let's keep it down.
Thank you. Not my time, please, Mr. Speaker. I need every second that I can get. So, now,
3.2.
I want you to, I know you don't understand that, but let me explain it to you. Let me explain it to you. No, I am not saying to you that because we reduce VAT by 2.5% that is the only contribution to the growth of the economy by 2.5. But I'm giving you a series. So I've given you the first one. In Japan, they created consumption. What we have been doing is design an economy that is creating consumption. Because the more consumption you have, the more taxes government collects in the back end. You see, the difference with you is you front-loaded. You front-load all the taxes on the people, and you crippled the economy. And the then Prime Minister said, I will take responsibility for that. That's why you over there, because the responsibility for that put you over there. But today, we reduce VAT, which increased consumption. It allowed the private sector to make more investment. So you're still not learning. So let me give you the other example. India. What did India do? In India, growth slowed to 6.7% from 7.1% a year earlier. Now, listen to this. That is important for you to understand us. This deceleration partly reflected adjustments by businesses to the introduction of goods and services tax in July. So, here's the lesson, Mr. Speaker. The economies that grew relaxed on taxes. The economy that shrunk in India was a direct result of the implementation of new taxes. You know, that was the year before. You don't even understand what was happening. You don't understand. So, Mr. Speaker, they cannot understand. And that is why the member for Labrie tried to say, it's not magic. It's not magic. We know it's not magic. It's just work. That's what it is. It is work, not magic. We don't believe in no magic. It's work. Real GDP growth. On page 7, it says real GDP growth is estimated to have increased by 2.5% in 2017 compared to growth of 1.7% in the previous year. So you still don't understand how it grew. So let me give you a few examples. 10.3% increase in total arrivals. 10.3% total arrivals. 13% increase in cruise passengers. 11% in stayover arrivals. You are asking, where did the growth come from? Now, you want to claim you build all the hotels. You can claim you built all of St. Lucia. The fact of the matter remains, you were in government for 5 years, and 3 of these 5 years, the economy was on decline. So, I don't even know how you're growing downward. I know you're growing upward. But you see, you speak upside down. So you always give the people a 6 for a 9. So when you speak upside down, your action is always upside down. So, manufacturing, I mean, all the evidence is there. It's what you choose to read, you know. The manufacturing sector is estimated to have expanded by 3% in 2017. So why would the manufacturing sector expand? Now, the expansion in Now you see, that's the brilliance of the United Workers' Party that you cannot understand. You are trying to figure out how there are no jobs at DSH, and yet still the unemployment figures have gone down by 4% since the UWP came into office. Because you see, your problem is you put all your eggs in one basket. All the years you have been there, you put all your eggs in one basket. And when the basket falls, the economy falls. But you focusing on DSH, where the thousands of jobs, Ojo Labs, you think that's the only formula that United Workers' Party has for creating jobs? You know, it is amazing that the members opposite don't get the most basic things about how to make an economy work. And no wonder St. Lucia has been in the situation that it is. So here's what it says. The expansion in most productive sectors resulted in improved labor market conditions. 8%. On page 8, it says there, while prices were influenced by higher inflation in St. Lucia's trading partners through import prices, these were partly offset by domestic factors such as the reduction in the VAT rate. So when you talk about, under UWP prices going up, the same public servants you are using, they were the ones who wrote that. I didn't have no influence on them in writing it. So, you want to find out what we did? However, the ratio of debt on page 9, the ratio of debt to GDP decreased to 68.5% in 2017 compared to 69.5% in 2016. No, the rebase was the year before that. And when the rebase happened, I was the only one in the parliament who commented on the rebase. Because you know what? We are not where we want to be yet. So there's nothing to celebrate and shout about. All I know is that we have a prime minister leading the Ministry of Finance and this economy who understands what we need to do to make the country grow. That is the difference. Now, you cannot give what you don't have. We have been asking a constitutional lawyer to fix an economy. Maybe if I needed to fix a law that he got wrong so many times, every law he brought here had to be amended. At the end of and he losing the cases. Can you imagine? So, how can you ask him to fix an economy? You cannot ask him to do that. Now, you want to accuse the government of a business-like approach? That is a business-like approach with a social conscience that the Labour Party did not have. You all talk about the gas tax. Why, when we match, the price went down the following week by $3 plus at the box? If you are not charging the price, why did the price go down by $3? So you asking, so why but since when the price went down, it didn't go back up. Obviously it didn't go back up. So the free, because what you need to tell the people is what you did with the $3 before the price went down. That is what you need to tell the people. Yes, it went, you are still making your $3.50 after it went down. You are still making your money after it went down. So, Mr. Speaker, these gentlemen on the other side, the honorable members, you know, they don't understand what to do and they are baffled. So they accuse us of magic. Reserves at the ECCB grew from 780.4 million, and that's on page 10, to 829.9 million. That gives us 5.6 months of cover. Over 5.5 months of cover, which is almost double the requirement of reserves at the CDB, at the ECCB, I mean. Now let's compare that with Barbados. What is the cover for Barbados? 1.2 month cover is all that they have. And let me tell you, if we had left the Labour, if the people of St. Lucia had left the Labour Party in office, we would be at the same grade that Barbados is today. But thanks to the smart people of St. Lucia, they knew that the time had come to right the wrongs that was done in putting the Labour Party into office. So, Mr. Speaker, SLP did not explain to us about the debt ratios. You see, the problem with them, ask them, lower levels of non-performing loan on page 10. The member for Labrie asked about Ching Ching. Since the UWP came into office, according to the Economic and Social Review, that the repayments on loans have improved. We have lower levels of non-performing loans under the United Workers' Party government. That is Ching Ching in the people's pocket. They can now pay their loans. The loans that they could not pay under the St. Lucia Labour Party. And Mr. Speaker, if you want to prove what I'm saying, stand at any junction on the Millennium Highway. When I see Bedfords and Lelands on the road, I know that UWP is back in office. Puis tout truck qui te sewe, tout zebde ka levada yo, tout hodia, tout ces trucks ça, en travaillant cette lycée. That is the difference under a United Workers' Party government. That is how we govern, Mr. Speaker. We govern for everybody. You know, before, one set of trucks alone was seen on the road. And when you stood in any street corner, you could count 40 trucks from the same company for the same day, while all other trucks were packed. Depuis flambeau en gouvernement, tout le monde qui a abandonné truck yo, via acheter pour ces trucks là, et ces trucks là sous chima à travail. Et dès là où les bokori still pas in a truck, because since December to now, there's been buoyancy in economic activity in the construction sector, because this is the Workers' Party. That is the difference. So you want to find out? Construction, you know, has expanded. This sector has expanded. Increased imports in construction material by 12.1%. Now I want to ask the members opposite a question. Where did that material go? Is it stored in a warehouse? All what you gave under the stimulus that was stored, ça haven. Depuis flambeau à toi pouvoir, toutes ces matériaux ça haven. And new imports have increased by 12.1%. You don't understand the idea of consumption. And when we say we are driving an economy to help drive the consumption patterns in this country, to help grow the economy, because as the member for Mikud North indicated, for us to take care of the social side of things, you have to grow the economy. Don't make people believe that money will fall from the sky. You have to work for it, and this party knows how to work. That is what Labour Party could not do. Now, I need to address some matters that came up. You know, Mr. Speaker, I watched the posture of members opposite. They come in a threatening tone of voice. You know, I am warning, you know, they point their finger. I am warning you, touch St. Jude's. You touch it for 5 years. You mash it up. You couldn't fix it. It's worse than when you inherited it. Today you want to say touch St. Jude as if you're going to do something. Or if they don't change this thing on DSH. So now, you know, Mr. Speaker, the member for Beaufort South previously said he's going to write to investors and tell them don't invest in this country. So no longer can he do that today. So you know, you heard him. Mr. Speaker, you heard him. He said he is going to take the DSH matter to court because all they are trying to do is to stifle progress. You didn't tell them that you all are planning to take the Sandals project to court too. Oh. You see, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, that is what this Labour Party is good for. Every time something good is happening in this country, they try to block it. That is how they expect people will elect them into office. But let me tell the honorable member for Castries South. A Sustainable Future for St. Lucia, an article, and Mr. Speaker, I have them to make copies available to the House. Now here's what, and when the member for Ancillary Canary said that is unpatriotic, he was right. This is what the article says. My concern is that my country today is seeing internationally questionable developments being toyed with on our island, from large-scale race courses looking to be built in local farming communities to the tune of $2 billion of our government money, and potentially damaging our chances of food security. Now, I know the member doesn't know Beaufort. Tell me one food that was being grown in the area in Beaufort where you growing rice in Beaufort? You growing grass in Beaufort? People in St. Lucia eating grass? I come into that. But the cattle had disappeared long before. As the member for Beaufort North, as the member for Beaufort South, what happened to the Boseju farm under the watch of the St. Lucia Labour Party? As a child, Boseju farm used to produce eggnog. As a child going to school, that is where we went on tours. I can tell you some of the cows from Boseju died in odd sun. And as the member for Beaufort South, Mr. Speaker, as the members, what happened? When they took over the farm, the biggest sheep I ever saw in St. Lucia, the Barbadian blackbelly, as a child going to primary school, that is where I went to see animals. When the Labour Party came into office, all the animals disappeared.
Honorable members. Honorable members.
I said to you, the biggest one I ever saw. Mr. Speaker, all the animals disappeared from the Boseju farm. Today, Labour Party want to present themselves as if they are champion for farmers. You are champion for farmers. You care about food security. You bird under the Labour Party coupe par coupe program. You burn the farmers' sheds. The farmers' sheds were burnt. And the farmers who went to harvest the bananas, the whole estate was chopped down. That was during the time when the Labour Party was on a rampage to destroy the banana industry in St. Lucia. Today you want to come and talk about food security? What food security? When St. Lucia had all these bananas, we had food security. Because I know about farming. You see, some people talk about farming. But you need a main crop in any agricultural sector to have food security. Because let's say farmer te plante fig. Bola go ek bo avina, yo ka plante dashin, yo ka plante defosiam, yo ka chipe se mangoa, etc. different ba. On the Labour Party, all of that was destroyed. For what? For cheap political gain. They went on a rampage. And Pat Joseph and the late Rupert Gajada was on Jugwa. And they said it. And today you want to come and tell the people of St. Lucia that you're concerned about food security. Because you see, you try to destroy what is good in this country. And then you try and come under the guise that you are working for the people. You're not working for the people. Mr. Speaker, they have some very troubling things. And I want to tell the Labour Party, your scare tactics and your threats will not work. The people of St. Lucia have spoken. And they were clear in the mandate given to this government to lead the affairs of this country for the next 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, if they are not satisfied, they know what to do. You want to incite instability in the country. You make all kinds of threats that if you do this and if you do that, but they're not saying the other part. But I have a good history of what happened in St. Lucia. I have a good history in what happened between 79 and 82. Win, we win. Lose, we win. That was the mantra of the Labour Party in 79. And who was, when they spoke about education, Mr. Speaker, ask them who was the youngest minister of education in St. Lucia. And ask them who changed the laws to make him the minister of education. Now they brought another one here who want to do something. According to Tony Cozier, no peaceful honeymoon. And he was describing when the former CEO of West Indies Cricket, and I have copies to make it available to the House, Mr. Speaker. The assistance of the International Cricket Council. Hear this? They brought in the International Cricket Council. They brought the Federation of International Cricketers. And that could not solve the problems created. Okay? They had been sought to reach settlement, but it came to nothing, leading to the latest need for arbitration and subsequent injunctions. The WIPA, which was the body representing the West Indies players, has a 14-0 record in such matters. So staggering. Now, that is the most renowned cricket writer and commentator in the West Indies, Tony Cozier. And here's what he said. So it was staggering to hear Healy say during the lengthy going away interview with Simon Crosskill on the Sportsmax last week that the WIPA had told the joint meeting of CARICOM Cricket Subcommittee earlier in September that if they happen to lose one, it would shut down cricket. In other words, there would be a strike. You stop strikes. And you know what? And you know where they send him? You know where they send him, Mr. Speaker? They send him to England to do more destruction.
Honorable members, member for Ancillary Canneries and member for Castries South.
Please note my time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, when you listen to members on the other side, you would think that these are honorable gentlemen and they would at least be straightforward in what they say to you. But I've told you about victimization. I think I'm the best picture of victimization in this honorable house. But I heard them about the sandals, and they said, oh, you gave sandals the waiver. You gave Sandals the waiver. Cabinet conclusion number 295 of 2014, dated 26 of May 2014. The following cabinet conclusion was submitted. Now hear that. Cabinet considered a memorandum dated 22nd May 2014 submitted by the Department of Finance, Economic Affairs, Social Security and approved the following on behalf of Premium Hotel Investors Limited, Smugglers Cove Resort and Spa. 100% waiver of withholding hotel accommodation tax. You heard that, Mr. Speaker? That is a tax that the hotel collects on behalf of the government of St. Lucia. The cabinet of the St. Lucia Labour Party gave 100% waiver of all of the withholding tax. You think that's all? 100% waiver on outstanding vendors tax. 100% waiver on outstanding PAYE, pay as you earn. The cabinet of the St. Lucia Labour Party. These are the things that they waived. Yes, 100%. Ask them. They are the gurus. Ask them. 100% waiver of outstanding withholding tax. No, the first one was HAT. 100% waiver of hotel accommodation tax. The last one, number 4, is 100% waiver of outstanding withholding tax. They didn't, I don't know the figures, the cabinet conclusion does not have the figures. Today you want to criticize for a tax that Sandals was not entitled to pay. The same Ministry of Finance made the recommendations. They were not required to pay this tax. But you want to attack them, and you want to say that because they are friends with the Prime Minister, that's why he granted them that. Well, tell us, why did you grant all of that? Because you had friends at that same hotel? Is that the basis on which government functions?
What year was that?
2014. You know, truth is something that we cannot hide from. It always catches up with us. This is what you all did. This is what was done. And today, you want to make people believe that this UWP has given millions of dollars to Sandals. You know, Mr. Speaker, that is the intellectual dishonesty we get from the other side. That is why nothing they say, you cannot take it. You cannot take anything they say at face value. Nothing. They prey on the poor. They brand
Honorable
themselves.
member, you have 15 minutes in which to complete your contribution.
You giving me some more time? I know you. Mr. Speaker, talking about victimization.
Honorable members, I must allow the atmosphere to calm itself because I do not want to keep granting you extra 1 minute, 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, let me know when I have 5 minutes. Mr. Speaker, here are the list of workers. The list of, when they talk about victimization, we have a list of 15 workers. Now, with the nice workers, their contract ended and it was not renewed. These workers had valid contracts. The Labour Party fired all of them. They took them to court, and the city council workers won their case. And today, the United Workers' Party, under the leadership of the Prime Minister, is making allocations to pay these workers that was victimized by the St. Lucia Labour Party. You want to talk about victimization? Now,
Collective responsibility.
So,
Collective responsibility.
so Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I hope you take it into consideration how much I can speak.
Honorable members. Honorable members.
You have to give me an extra 5 minutes.
Continue, member.
Mr. Speaker, when I was in opposition, and I want members opposite to pay attention. When I was in opposition, I was victimized to the core, but I didn't know it had been reduced to writing. So I have here from a Gmail a document which says CDP projects in opposition constituencies. And it's from Kenny D. Anthony.
Is it the same one?
CC'd to Tracy Polius, and it is addressed to Mr. Fede. To Mr. Fede. And it reads, "This is to confirm my instruction to you that no projects are to be undertaken in opposition-led constituencies without my prior knowledge and approval. Sincerely, Prime Minister."
Independence.
Mr. Speaker, there's nothing wrong with that if when you went to the Prime Minister, he kept his word. Mr. Speaker, for 5 years, I begged in this House, Mr. Speaker. I begged for $35,000 to complete the project of the Bexon Park. I went to the then Prime Minister in person. I had conversations with him. I wrote. So I didn't speak to you? I came to you. You didn't speak to me. You didn't speak to me, but I came to you. And you said to me, right. I went and they put me. I met, Mr. Speaker, in the corridor. I was left standing in the corridor of the Ministry of Economic Affairs, waiting for about 20 minutes, and I could hear the laughing and the things going on inside. As a parliamentary representative, I subjected myself to all of that because I was not working for myself. I've been working on behalf of the people of Castries Southeast. And you know what happened, Mr. Speaker? The 5 years ended, and that project was never completed. If that is not victimization. 5 years begging. And the member for Dennery, I will come to you. I had the hands up, but Mr. Speaker.
The two Denneries, there's ministers and cabinet. Ask you not to use that. Which one?
Okay, I will not use it. I will leave it for better times. Mr. Speaker, we need to understand that one time we will be on this side and one time we'll be on that side. And when I used to give the members things for their constituency, when I came into office, I said, give me a quarter of what I used to give you and I will be happy. And I got nothing. And I'm saying to them today, show the record of what you did for me. And I'm doing twice of everything you did for me when I was in opposition. I'm willing to do double. I'm willing to do double. Not what you did through Joachim, not what you did through my opponent. Bring it. Mr. Speaker, we talk about
Through him, eh? Through him.
we talk about artificial intelligence. They were the ones who said that it's MP's program. It's a program for parliamentary representatives. I have a paper here from CNN. We heard the member for Castries East talk about mind bending. You know what the CNN report said on Sunday? It says AI, which is artificial intelligence, is going to account for a lot of growth, not just in tech, but in most industries going forward. Mr. Speaker, you want me to talk about SCL? I'll talk about Robert Lindquist. I have every receipt that you paid the $3 million, even though it was deleted from the SmartStream system. And it could only have been deleted from the SmartStream system by a senior, a high person in authority. But I had time to get it before it was deleted. $3 million paid to investigate me. I have the copy of every phone call that I made. Every email that I sent is here. And the member for Beaufort South in his presentation was about to say the report said that, but he changed his words halfway. I want, Mr. Speaker, I am calling on the opposition, who was in government at the time, to come and show the people of St. Lucia where you spent $3 million to investigate me. And then to say that that is not true. And I'm so happy the leader of the opposition and member for Castries, he has excellent timing. He walked in at the right time. At the previous sitting of the House, when I was making my presentation, he stood up, Mr. Speaker, and you remember I allowed him to speak. I said, let him speak. You know what he said? He didn't know nothing about investigation. Now, Mr. Speaker, I have in my hand a cabinet conclusion, and maybe we should cite the member for misleading the House. A cabinet conclusion dated 2nd of July 2012. The following cabinet conclusion was submitted for your consideration. Cabinet confirmed the appointment of Mr. Robert Lindquist for the purpose of conducting a forensic investigation on behalf of the government of St. Lucia. The Attorney General, after consultation with the Prime Minister, will act on behalf of the government of St. Lucia. And I went further.
Honorable member for Castries East.
Mr. Speaker, the member is misleading the House. He said
Honorable member.
He said
Honorable member.
42 seats.
No, let me make a point here. You turn on your light and you turn it off and you allow it to go. You said let him continue. He has moved on. I have not heard in he moving on. He has not said anything to me to impact in any way adversely to your position. So
that's another 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in my hand. Now remember, I said the cabinet conclusion was 2nd of July 2012. The attendees at that cabinet meeting on the 2nd of July 2012, members present, Honorable Dr. Kennedy Anthony, Honorable Philip J. Pierre. I don't need to go down the rest. That is the point I want to make. When it was confirmed, members present on the 9th of July 2012, Dr. Kenny Anthony, Honorable Philip J. Pierre. Members present. So when members come to this honorable house and tell you they don't know this and they don't know that, I know that's not true, Mr. Speaker. I know that's not true. But you see, Mr. Speaker, they're on a witch hunt. And I have in my hand there the document of the flood case that was filed against Alan Chasney and Kenneth Casabon on the Soufre lighting, the lighting of the playing field when we had the opening. That is how this Labour Party operates. They go after you to try and destroy you. But you see, Mr. Speaker, when I have 5 minutes, let me know. I have a strong wife, Mr. Speaker. And I must express profound thanks and appreciation to her for all that she bears. Because if anybody knows me, she is the one who knows me. You see, they have attacked her. They have attacked her integrity. They have said all kinds of things about her. I heard the member for Beaufort North speak about special education and what they do. I have in my hand here a book, Strategies for Teaching Learners with Special Needs. This is a textbook that is used in universities in the US. And you know who's the co-author of this book? Genevieve Wendy Bailey. And that's about the third. So when people try to marginalize you, because she doesn't make a big fuss, and she does not make a big show, so when they cannot get me, they try and go after people that pertains to me. Mr. Speaker, they have even tried to infiltrate my family and have paid persons within my family to go and say things against me.
Honorable member, you have 5 minutes left.
That is the extent to which the Labour Party will go. But Mr. Speaker, my name will be cleared one of these days, because this report must make it here. But I want to tell them, there are things that people need to know in St. Lucia. And while they want to talk about, I want the member for Beaufort South to tell me the proposed integrated resort development on the back page of the Star newspaper with his signature at the bottom there. If that is not so, then I expect you to file a lawsuit against the Star. If this is not an authentic document, so the same DSH you want to give all the blues. And you sign a presentation? I thought we used to watch presentations. You watch presentations and your signature. No, if I make a presentation to you, my signature will be on the presentation. So you that made the presentation to DSH. Now, it says Senator speaks out. Those lawbreakers, those lawmakers who become lawbreakers should be jailed. And I agree with that. And I want to say, I agree with that. And the member for Castries South talk about us trying to victimize on a witch hunt. I want the member for Castries South to know through you, Mr. Speaker, that the investigation on his vehicle started in 2015 and the United Workers' Party was not in government in 2015. So he needs to find out who. I want you to tell the people of St. Lucia, and when you want to talk about scandals, Lombards, you ask about how could the Prime Minister be investigating. Well, how did you appoint the former ministers, Emma, Robert, and the other one to investigate the scandal that they created? Today you're asking questions. And I want to tell you.
Honorable member, you should be summarizing.
The student loan scandal. What is Kenny hiding? That is the... Can we go to the screen for 2 minutes as I'm rounding off? Mr. Speaker, the constituency of Castries Southeast, which was neglected. And you can just Just take a quick look at what is there. All of the communities within Castries Southeast are being touched. I am especially pleased with the desilting program that has begun long before the rainy season. We have been able to do some work to relieve the flooding in that area. There are footpaths, there are drains, there are roads being constructed. I must thank the Minister for Infrastructure for the works being done. We are doing things to relieve the pain and the pressure on the people of Castries Southeast. Concrete roads, bridges. You know what? When you squeeze the people, when you did not do projects to affect the people of Castries Southeast, you know what? When you said you do everything to get Guy Joseph out of the Parliament of St. Lucia, the people of Castries Southeast gave me the most resounding victory a UWP candidate has had in Castries Southeast. And I want to thank them, and I will continue to serve them with pride and with dignity, and I will let them know their parliamentary representative will never be caught in a scandal, will never be caught in corruption. That is why, Mr. Speaker, I am pleading and I am begging, I am asking the Labour Party, the report that you are hiding, that the people, the taxpayers paid $3 million for, table it in the House, bring it in the House, and let the people know where Guy Joseph went wrong. Mr. Speaker, I believe in education. Through my efforts, I now have 5 students at Monroe who have 75% scholarship. I have paid for 25 students last year for Sir Arthur Lewis Community College and 22 this year. Wow. This is a parliamentary representative who believes in the young people and in educating the young people. That is what this United Workers' Party is about. And that is what this budget, Mr. Speaker, in closing, this budget is going to deliver more for the people of St. Lucia than we ever received for the last 5 years on the St. Lucia Labour Party. I thank you.
No problem. No problem.
Minister for Infrastructure, Ports, Energy and Labour, and member for Castries North. Honorable member for Castries North. Honorable member for Castries North. Honorable member for Castries North.
Oh, sorry.
Honorable members, we ready to hear Castries North MP? Okay, very well.
Mr. Speaker, in the last few moments, probably the last few hours, we've had quite a bit of animation in this chamber, responding to what was delivered by the Honorable Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, a few days ago. But, Mr. Speaker, no animation, no amount of noises, no amount of heckling will stop the might and the work of the United Workers' Party. Mr. Speaker, at this point, we have heard, analyzed, crystallized, and consumed the presentation made by the Minister for Finance on the theme, Building Resilience Today to Secure Our Future. For some among us, based on the location of their seats, after 1 hour and 45 minutes of consumption of the bountiful policy initiatives distilled and presented by the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, they are intoxicated, inebriated, and confused as they struggle to find their blurred path to justify their position to the present, their opposition to the presentation of the 2018-19 budget policy statement. Mr. Speaker, the essence and spirit of the policies are enunciated by the Prime Minister, Minister for Finance this year, reflects the maturity of a relatively newly minted Minister for Finance who has proven to be innovative, bold, daring, and courageous, yet strategic. Collectively, Mr. Speaker, the strategies and initiatives mentioned by the Minister for Finance, justifiably supported by the necessary finances and the appropriate institutional and organizational structures, infuses confidence among the people, particularly to the business sector here in St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, on this premise, I am motivated to give support to the Appropriation Bill 2018-2019 as presented by the Minister for Finance on Tuesday evening. Mr. Speaker, the presentation by the Prime Minister must be placed into context to have an appreciation of the environment in which we are operating and the circumstances under which we were summoned to take control in June of 2016. Mr. Speaker, in June 2016, when the people of St. Lucia mobilized and rallied around the United Workers' Party with one simple exhortation, "You pay!" It was their clarion battle call to state that enough was enough. Mr. Speaker, you still pay. It was that resounding victory at the poll in which brazen men and women were rejected, probably not losing their deposit, but rather flattened thinly into oblivious realm, into nothingness. We know who they are. But, Mr. Speaker, it was that resounding victory, we'll have a drink after I finish. It was that resounding victory that presented this government with the inheritance of an economy that was sluggish, with negative economic growth, persistent high unemployment, high debt to GDP ratio, and an urgent need to contain inflation to imaginable levels. This was 2006-2011, but it is the context within this budget must be understood and studied. This, in a nutshell, Mr. Speaker, is what we inherited and for which we were called upon to fix, recalibrate, and re-energize to build a new St. Lucia sufficiently resilient to secure our future. Mr. Speaker, permit me for a brief moment, as many may have pontificated on their version and interpretation of the state of our country's economy and social health, to reflect on the context within which the Minister for Finance presented the 2017-18 budget. Mr. Speaker, for the year 2017-2018, you may have recalled the Minister for Finance presenting his budget on the theme, Building a New St. Lucia. In our quest to build that new St. Lucia, the Minister for Finance mustered the courage to, one, reduced the value-added tax by 2.5%, or 16.66% reduction. 2, increased excise tax on fuel from $2.50 per gallon to $4 a gallon. In essence, dedicating a 1.50 fuel tax to refund, or rather to fund, the maintenance and reconstruction of roads. These were 2 among many other policy measures presented last financial year to finance our recurrent and capital expenditure program within the Ministry of Infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, members opposite referred to those measures as egregious, to say the least. As far as they are concerned, these measures were bound to cause this government to forgo substantial amounts of revenue and causing the IMF to sharpen its proverbial teeth. And coming to think of it, they should have been outside this chamber this evening at this time, waiting to prescribe their well-known medicine of salary cuts, retrenchment, removal of all subsidies on basic commodities, new tax measures, elimination of investment incentives regime, salary and wage cuts, and other fiscal measures. Bold and courageous, Mr. Speaker, we faced those challenges and defied the odds and instituted measures in fulfillment of our campaign promises, promises made, promises fulfilled. But, Mr. Speaker, the success of those initiatives have brought material strength to the 2018-2019 budget, reflected on page 8 of the Minister for Finance budget address, confirming that we did better than expected with an estimated shortfall of only $27 million as opposed to the projected loss of revenue of $55 million. This is 49% better than anticipated. Mr. Speaker, in addition, the prophets and the acolytes of gloom and doom tried very hard to convince the people of St. Lucia that we are very much like them and would grossly affect their pockets of the taxpayers of this country, particularly with the fuel tax. But, Mr. Speaker, I would hate to believe that we are like them, because we have earned a reputation of being a prudent, caring, and strategic government of the people. Yet, they fail to understand that we are the government of the people, by the people, for the people, who will build resilience to fight the wrong that needs resistance, for the cause that needs assistance, for our future in the distance. Mr. Speaker, it is for that cause and for that future distance that in building a new St. Lucia, we have demonstrated our resilience in warding off looming social and economic dangers to our country. Of major significance, Mr. Speaker, according to the Economic and Social Review for 2017, unemployment figures dropped from 21.3% of the labor force in 2016 to 20.2% in 2017. Mr. Speaker, while one can argue about the financial health of the country in terms of its various balances, there is no doubt that there has been economic improvements in the macroeconomics of this country. What this is saying, Mr. Speaker, is that there is renewed confidence in the management of the country. Yeah. It is this confidence that will be carried forward as we continue to take this country to a higher level of economic and social prosperity. Mr. Speaker, ever since the budget address and the approval of the Appropriation Act 2017-2018, the members opposite, microscope in hand, have been searching at the fiscal numbers to see deterioration of our fiscal situation and the eventual downfall of this government. But, Mr. Speaker, no. Mr. Speaker, my assessment upon review of last fiscal year There's probably no need to boast or brag about outstanding performances, but certainly I can say to this honorable House and to the people of St. Lucia is that bagay pa pli mauvais. Mr. Speaker, we are on a road to recovery. We are experiencing growth. The unemployment situation has improved, and there's a gradual return of confidence among investors. Notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, all their talk. Even members opposite realize the improvement and are so desperate to get back into office, they are now having dreams of brighter days. But, Mr. Speaker, dreams of brighter days will remain mere dreams if they aren't prepared to participate in building resilience today to secure our future. So they have said not to take comfort with the numbers of the current performance of the economy. But while we do appreciate the advice, however, Mr. Speaker, let me assure the people of this country that we are mindful of the need to be prudent. However, we are in office to bring about positive results and increase opportunities. Now, Mr. Speaker, having glossed over two of the economic indicators as reflected in the Economic and Social Review, let me now address the medium-term vision plan as far as infrastructure is concerned. Simultaneously, I shall attempt to link the plan, policies, and programs and the impact on the people of the country. Mr. Speaker, it is said that no organization or institution or agency can survive without a strategy or a plan. The Ministry of Infrastructure is no exception. We are cognizant of the significance of the public infrastructure to national, social, and economic development in St. Lucia, and the extent to which it has been severely challenged over the years. Mr. Speaker, public infrastructure has suffered from dwindling budgetary allocations and, more recently, severe weather events due to climate change. Transport infrastructure, roads, bridges, culverts, crossings, and even rivers and watercourses faced the wrath of Hurricane Thomas in 2010 and the Christmas Eve trough in 2013. Mr. Speaker, the ravage of Hurricanes Irma and Maria on our neighbors remain etched in our minds. God forbids that one of these days we are visited by an unfriendly visitor. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we pray for the best, we work for the best, and we prepare for the best. Mr. Speaker, this is why, in our vision, planning and programming, we as a responsible government are building resilience in our public infrastructure, including schools and public buildings. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Infrastructure, in its medium-term vision for road infrastructure, intends to maintain the primary road network, the Castries-Grosley Highway, right through the west and east coast and back to Castries, at the highest motorable and acceptable international roughness index. Mr. Speaker, the intention is to ensure that over time, all of our roads will be free of potholes, and that certainly will result in the reduction in vehicular operating costs. Consequently, in the north of the island, from Corinth through to Dayglow, the bypass roads, among others, will be upgraded. And that program, Mr. Speaker, has started, and the evidence is all over for those who can see to see. And if they're blind, I'm sure they're feeling. The objective is to reduce, in the short term, the traffic congestion and conflicts along the Castries-Grosley Highway and within the city. Now, I know, Mr. Speaker, yesterday a particular member raised the issue of the Castries-Grosley Highway. And as I proceed with my presentation, I will deal with this situation. In tandem with these initiatives and some soft measures along the Castries-Grosley Highway, it is the intention to reduce the traffic situation, and we will conduct an integrated traffic study to inform our course of action and inform our medium to long-term plan. One issue which was raised, Mr. Speaker, during the rebuttal yesterday, and I believe it was the parliamentary representative for Castries South, was that of the North-South Link Road. Mr. Speaker, in his rebuttal or in his presentation, he questioned the validity of utilizing the UKCIF loan, or rather grant, as opposed to utilizing it on the North-South Link Road from Grosley to Dennery. Mr. Speaker, let me just give you an indication of some of what will at least highlight or enlighten, rather, members on the magnitude of the road to be done from the north to the south, known as the North-South Link Road. Mr. Speaker, that project was a project visioned by the government of the United Workers' Party during the period 2006-2011. It was part of, Mr. Speaker, the vision plan for the development of the country, which was termed the Quadrant Plan, for which in this Honorable House, members opposite more or less ridiculed the idea of having a quadrant plan for the social and economic development. Of course, Mr. Speaker, we lost the election, but the then government, the former administration, continued to explore the possibility of developing the road, and several consultants were engaged to come up with proposals for the development of the North-South Link Road between Grosley and Dennery. A company by the name of Stantec Consulting International Limited completed the North-South Link Road feasibility study on behalf of the Department of Infrastructure, Ports and Energy, and made a number of recommendations which I shall simply gloss through. In this, Mr. Speaker, there were a number of recommendations in terms of the direction of the proposed roads. And in there, it was recommended that they would have there are two options. Option one, which would be establishing a road west of Dennery, that is in Lakai, to north of Debarra, the length being 11.15 kilometers. Then the second part is the north of Badini to Grosley. Third part, north of Debarra to Jiwa. And the fourth is Jiwa to Shock roundabout. The total length of this option, Mr. Speaker, is 32.16 kilometers. The second option, Mr. Speaker, comprises 4 links. Dennery to Forestier, 9.76, Forestier to Castries, 3.04, Forestier to Jiwa, 3 kilometers, and Jiwa to Shock roundabout, 4.14 kilometers, a total of 19.94 kilometers. Mr. Speaker, the cost of constructing that road, looking at the two options, option one, which was the preferred option, the proposed estimate on that option, Mr. Speaker, is $622,045,000 US dollars. $622,045,000. The second option is $415,112,000. So, Mr. Speaker, the point I'm making is that in no way, there's no way that 30 million pounds from the UK government could have constructed that road. And so, as a responsible government and a prudent government, because the UK funding, which is grant funding, is time sensitive, we were forced to make the best decision, and we decided to repair and reconstruct infrastructure that is already existing, hence the decision to look at the Millennium Highway and the West Coast Road. Mr. Speaker, I will update soon on how we are proceeding, in that the bids are already being prepared, and hopefully later this year we will proceed with and we'll start construction of those segments of road. Mr. Speaker, let me move quickly on to the issue of bridge condition assessments. Mr. Speaker, we have, ever since assuming office, undertaken to do a number of assessments of our bridges throughout the country. We have found out, Mr. Speaker, and identified a number of bridges to be replaced, as well as those that require maintenance. There are 3 bridges earmarked to be replaced very soon, among them being the Wavin-Poisson Bridge and the Cul-de-Sac Bridge, which assistance from the Japanese government through JICA has been secured. The third bridge, Mr. Speaker, the second set of bridge, the third bridge rather, is the construction of a new bridge at PI. And yesterday, I believe, a member raised the issue of PI, and that bridge to replace the current Bailey Bridge, which was constructed as a temporary bridge crossing in the aftermath of the 2013 Christmas Eve trough. A permanent bridge and better bridge will be constructed, and it's expected to improve the traffic maneuverability in the area. Funding for reconstruction will be provided by the World Bank under the Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project. Mr. Speaker, general conditions of bridges in St. Lucia. It is a serious matter, Mr. Speaker, because oftentimes we have encountered and experienced situations in St. Lucia whereby bridges just suddenly collapse. And the most recent one, if I recall, was the culvert crossing at Rodney Bay, which collapsed a few years ago, and the then government had to quickly find resources to rebuild those. We have found out, Mr. Speaker, in our condition assessments, that there are a number of bridges which require urgent attention. The Deglo Mark Bridge, Piat, La Passe, Wavin 212, the Bacadere and Il Pirata bridges. All of those, among others, need the attention of the ministry, and we shall proceed to provide the necessary attention. With the impact of major storm events such as Debbie, Iris, Thomas, and Christmas Eve trough and Matthew, a number of bridges have been negatively impacted in some way or the other, highlighting the need for immediate attention of those bridges. Mr. Speaker, it is indeed a situation which must be taken into consideration, as there's a cost to road users when our infrastructure is not up to standard. It significantly reduces the likelihood of bridge failure, especially during a major storm event, and to reduce economic losses as a result of road closures. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the targets set for our bridge program are: 1, reconstruct 6 bridges by year 4, refurbish and maintain 32 bridges by year 4, reduce flooding in the cul-de-sac basin by 80% by year 4, reduce the number of bridges in our inventory with a remaining life of less than 5 years, and institute a comprehensive program of periodic inspections and routine maintenance of bridges, culverts, and pedestrian passes to identify any risk by year 2. The intention, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that at all times our infrastructure, bridges, roads, etc., are kept in a very, very pristine and motorable condition. Mr. Speaker, I want to quickly spend 2 minutes on legislative authority. Mr. Speaker, the damage to our road infrastructure is not only as a result of a reactive or poorly structured or designed maintenance regime. The damage of our roads are caused by ingress of water from poorly designed driveways with no grills, tracking of heavy equipment such as excavators on our roads, construction waste spilled from cement trucks and heavy lorries. Mr. Speaker, the public is fed up. We have attempted to enforce the laws, but we are forced with a very archaic piece of legislation, the Works and Roads Act, which has little or no teeth remaining. To this end, Mr. Speaker, it is our intention this year to review this outdated piece of legislation to allow the Ministry of Infrastructure to enforce and penalize the perpetrators. Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious issue. Not too long ago, we were called, or we had reason rather, to address a situation on the Monjaro Hill for years where the disposal or the spillover of cement, concrete from those concrete trucks affected the rideability on that portion of road. It cost us some money, but I believe, Mr. Speaker, the legislation must be dealt with to penalize, whether by new taxes, which I'm sure the gentleman on the other side will support, so as those persons who are investing in concrete trucks will be called upon to pay a levy for the potential spillage and waste likely to be deposited on our roads, interfering with the infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, also, the legislation must be revised to examine some of the penalties, some of which are just $20 and $50, which makes absolutely no sense. Mr. Speaker, road infrastructure comprises approximately 700 kilometers of paved roads, 55 kilometers of primary roads, 122 of secondary roads, and 423 tertiary roads. Mr. Speaker, the current condition of our roads is one that we must have concern for. And to ensure that we provide and meet our objectives of having high-quality roads, we are introducing within the Ministry of Infrastructure an international measurement of road quality that will instruct the ministry as to the interventions necessary and the preventative maintenance program that should be executed. That program, Mr. Speaker, I will speak about as I move further and explain the road maintenance management system that has been introduced in the Ministry of Infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, road users complain of potholes, blocked ditches, and other conditions of our roads. In the Ministry of Infrastructure, we have developed the policy of responding to potholes and to eliminate potholes in 7 days. But I have said that cannot be our charter. Our charter must be to prevent potholes from emerging by constantly monitoring the road surface and making timely interventions to prevent potholes from developing, because signs certainly appear way before those potholes qualify as being a pothole. Mr. Speaker, please permit me to repeat in this honorable House that the Minister for Finance, in his wisdom, has approved 79% of $14 million to my ministry for roads maintenance. This is the second year in which we have been provided with this allocation, and we pledged to the people of St. Lucia that we will deliver your roads to you, that we intend to drastically improve on the rideability of the roads. Mr. Speaker, one member yesterday indicated that there was 0, 0, 0, 0, almost like a salary increase that never came, under the capital program. But Mr. Speaker, what really he was looking at was the capital expenditure. Later on, I'll explain to you the location of the expenditure under the recurrent expenditure, which will take care of the routine activities of the ministry under recon and rehab. Mr. Speaker, our goal is to significantly reduce the level of deterioration of the road network and to cut back the area of potholes and, of course, improve the surface of our roads. Mr. Speaker, let me move on to the road maintenance management system. Our commitment over the last 2 years, is to maintain an excellent road surface. Therefore, we were able to, in negotiations with the Prime Minister, to get his approval to agree to invite tenders to engage them with the necessary competence to assist in addressing the needs through a road maintenance management system. A road asset management system is a collection of software tools that help the road. So we have been able, Mr. Speaker, to engage a company who won the tender by the name of Survey of Finland, who are in St. Lucia now, working with the staff of the road maintenance unit within the department, and I'm sure some of you may have seen a number of vehicles written road surveys, road maintenance, properly marked, properly wrapped, to give an indication that we are active on those roads. We will be there morning, noon, and night with our beacons, inspecting the roads, having a true assessment of the roads, and giving an instruction to those who must repair it, so that over time we will see a tremendous improvement in our road infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, I'm confident that this will not be a show. I am confident that with the support of the Minister for Finance, who have already demonstrated it last year, and who in this year's budget has indicated his commitment to provide the necessary resources, will be able to underpin the program of road inspection and maintenance, and to be able to improve the International Roughness Index of that road. The objective of the consultancy, Mr. Speaker, is to provide a sustainable source of relevant and valid information that will instruct us on road maintenance, to enhance the programming and budgeting of periodic maintenance and rehabilitation, and to reduce economic challenges posed by natural disasters and climate change. Mr. Speaker, the Castries-Grosley Highway. Mr. Speaker, the most recent population census conducted in St. Lucia in 2010 indicated that just over 15% of the population resided in the Northern District. The last administration, Mr. Speaker, considering the last population census of 2010, said just over 15% of the population, 15, resided in the Northern District. Mr. Speaker, as a consequence of the increase in population with new housing, etc., the traffic situation is worsening daily. The last government, in its wisdom, attempted to extend the original plan for the highway, which ended at the Shock roundabout, and decided to proceed with a four-lane highway to Grosley. At that time, Mr. Speaker, they were working on statistics provided in 2007 in as volumes. Upon our entry into office and examining the program of the last administration, we felt that it was necessary to do a more holistic, long-term solution for the Castries-Grosley Highway. As a consequence, we decided that one of the first measures we should undertake is to consider the bypass roads, improve them, while we renegotiate with the Kuwait Fund to consider in the not-too-distant future the expansion of the Castries-Grosley Highway. Mr. Speaker, what this will do, it's one, to create better, wider, comfortable, more attractive bypass roads or back roads, to remove the traffic off the main Castries-Grosley Highway, to give motorists alternative routes to get beyond Castries and bypass Castries, and to release the traffic on the Castries-Grosley Highway that will, in essence, comfort and temper the volume of traffic moving north and south. Mr. Speaker, that program has already started. And for those of you who traverse the roads and venture out beyond the Castries-Grosley Highway, you'll notice that a number of roads in the north, Laritret, Vieux-Sequi, in a number of those areas, Armandale, Union, where we have made intervention, and I must admit that motorists have responded by using those roads and to a certain extent abusing them. Mr. Speaker, we will continue. Mr. Speaker, let me look at the major projects for 2018-2019. Bridges and culverts. Plans, as I indicated, are in place for the reconstruction of the Wavin-Poisson Bridge and the Cul-de-sac Bridge to be funded by Japanese government through its agency JICA. Funding approval in the estimates, $3 million to cover land acquisition and the construction of a bypass road and crossing at Wavin-Poisson is allocated from the government of St. Lucia and approximately $11 million from JICA. Mr. Speaker, in the first quarter of this fiscal year, we will be officially opening the CDB-funded Tomaso Bridge and the Canaries Bridge. The JICA bridges, Mr. Speaker, are in an advanced stage, and as a consequence of the readiness and our ability to have responded to the Japanese government has written us, in fact, that is the Japanese government, the chief consultant rather, has written to the government of St. Lucia inviting 2 representatives from the Department of Infrastructure and Labor to the financial bid opening, contract negotiation, and contract signing in Japan from the 18th to the 27th of May. So from the 18th to the 27th of May, 2 representatives, one being the permanent secretary, will go to Japan to witness the transparency, the opening of the bid and negotiation for the commencement of work in cul-de-sac and in Wavin-Poisson. The Canaries Bridge, Mr. Speaker, and the Tomaso Bridge were 2 bridges as a consequence of Thomas, which certainly needed attention. The last administration continued with the process, and upon returning to government, Mr. Speaker, we expeditiously proceeded with the Caribbean Development Bank to ensure the funding was secured. So while some are saying we are stopping projects here and stopping projects there, Mr. Speaker, it is not a matter of simply stopping. It's a matter of contemplating what is prudent, what makes sense, and what will create the impact that is necessary without affecting the fiscal situation of this government. Mr. Speaker, we are not reckless. We are one who contemplates and one who takes sound, though bold, decisions in the interest of the people of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, that Canaries Bridge, Mr. Speaker, built at a cost of $5.857 million, will be completed in April of this year and soon after opened. The Tomaso Bridge, Mr. Speaker, which has lagged behind, which has lagged behind to a great extent, Mr. Speaker, the date has been extended and a revised completion date is May of this year. Other funded projects, Mr. Speaker, in the budget presentation, I should run through quickly, include recurrent expenditure program, operating and maintenance, $14 million. And it's in the budget for those who can't see. It's in there, Mr. Speaker, and it's on page those who can't see. I know they can read, but some can't see. It's in the estimates, Mr. Speaker, on page 205, $14 million for recurrent expenditure, and it's broken down into operating and maintenance, $9.3 million, supplies and maintenance, $5.04 million. And to explain this, Mr. Speaker, Supplies and maintenance includes procurement of asphalt, procurement of road construction material, procurement of other supplies to be able to undertake those works. Operating and maintenance services, Mr. Speaker, includes subcontracting and other works awarded to persons, to contractors to undertake those works. And you have hire of equipment and transport, $1.6 million, Mr. Speaker, making it a total of $14 million to be spent on the maintenance of our road infrastructure.
They were looking for the loans.
Mr. Speaker, yes, they were looking for the loans. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the Minister for Finance will bring clarity to the loans. Mr. Speaker, we have put together a practical budget, a budget that reflects our means and our abilities to finance within the environment of our earnings. However, with our ambition, we have been able to negotiate with the Taiwanese, who have said to us that they are prepared to provide, and they have approved in principle, a loan of $150 million to St. Lucia. 100 of that, Mr. Speaker, is a loan to SLASPA. So we cannot reflect SLASPA's loan in the estimates. When the time comes, the SLASPA legislation is quite clear as to how they proceed in as far as they procure services and procure funding. The $50 million, Mr. Speaker, that $50 million will be acquired on the same terms and conditions that they designed, that they engineered through the finance, or rather, through the design finance concept. We cannot reflect it in the estimates, Mr. Speaker, unless negotiations are settled, signed, and prepared to be delivered. And the former Prime Minister, who is on the other side, I'm sure, will recall, in 1997-98, when they introduced BOLT, build, own, what's it? Build, operate, lease, and transfer. I attacked it once. I attacked it, but, Mr. Speaker, it's a good idea. At that time in 1997, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the estimates in 1997-1998, there's no reflection of that bolt until it was activated upon completion. Until. So, Mr. Speaker, it is a similar concept. But you see, Mr. Speaker, in the current economic environment that we all are in, everybody, governments, institutions, organizations are finding ways of financing infrastructure and financing services without following the traditional pathways for which international institutions also try to interfere and to stifle development and productivity. Mr. Speaker, I know time is running, but let me quickly move on to a few other areas because I also have to deal with the Department of Labor. I have how many? Half an hour? Oh, you were giving me half an hour. So, Mr. Speaker, let me move on quickly to deal with some other areas. Mr. Speaker, no, I didn't attack you, you know. I thought I heard you. But, Mr. Speaker, let me move on and deal with some other areas. Road safety, Mr. Speaker, is one program which may, to some people, have no significance. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm very concerned about what has happened, the carnage that is taking place on our roads. Yes. And so, Mr. Speaker, if you look this year, throughout the country, you will see an increase in the number of road signs, traffic signs, and soon you will see directional signs.
Remember, you have 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Thank you very much. Directional signs. Yes, he has to warm up to come, put his boxing gloves to deal with red. So, Mr. Speaker, you will see those road signs. We are introducing programs, Mr. Speaker, that will address the issue of hotspots where accidents constantly happen. Mr. Speaker, one place I can tell you is the Shock Hill, which has a reputation of accidents and the claiming of death, of the claiming of lives. A number of people have been paralyzed, Mr. Speaker, on that Shock Hill. Yeah. We, as a ministry responsible for road safety, must investigate and find out what the problem is. The problem may be about the geometrics of the road. It may be they're driving too fast, and if they're driving too fast, then we must put tempering measures, Mr. Speaker, to slow down the traffic and to ensure that we save lives rather than to accelerate speed on our roads. So we'll deal with it, Mr. Speaker. We'll put in place road safety management, safe roads and mobility, safer vehicles is one other area, safe road users, and post-crash responses. Mr. Speaker, also you will see in the coming weeks the implementation of crash barriers throughout the island in a number of locations in St. Lucia, along the West Coast Road, along the East Coast Road, along the Castries Harbour. A number of persons have lost their lives as a consequence of our neglect in providing those crash barriers and rails to protect them. Quickly, Mr. Speaker, I want to deal with the question of port services. A lot has been said about the redevelopment of the Hironoya International Airport, and I have spoken about it before. And I have said different governments, different regimes, different administrations deal with certain initiatives differently. We were in government, we were at the point of takeoff, like the member for Labrie, Republic of Labrie would say. We're at the point of takeoff. We introduced the tax or levy. We were negotiating the implementation of the project. The last administration came, they said no. Let us go the other way with the World Bank, the IFC, and attempt to get the work done. Okay? Well, they stopped the tax. But they used some to do works on the airport. So they went in that direction, Mr. Speaker. We returned, and the policy of the government was that we rather go the other way and take full responsibility and management of the development and management of the airport. Mr. Speaker, negotiations are in an advanced stage, and hopefully we are moving on and to commence construction for the latest September 2018. Mr. Speaker, the question of our cargo ports, we have seen an increase in traffic in Port Castries. We have seen an increase in traffic, particularly at this time during the cruise ship season, sometimes with 6, 7, and 8 tourist ships in Port Castries, 2 anchored outside, 6 on the inner port. And with the expansion of Point Seraphine, the time has come for us to consider establishing a new commercial port. We are exploring now, Mr. Speaker, and conducting feasibilities on the potential of looking at cul-de-sac for the establishment of a new port, the details of which will be communicated to this Honourable House sooner than later. Mr. Speaker, it was my intention to deal with energy, but my colleague minister who shared the energy portfolio with me has said much about energy, and I'll reserve this later, Mr. Speaker, for a formal statement in the House on energy. That is important, Mr. Speaker, because much is being said about the government lack of interest and lack of passion for energy. Mr. Speaker, we are passionate, determined, and committed to meet our commitment and to introduce all of the initiatives previously established, previously initiated to bring St. Lucia to its rightful place of development. And so, Mr. Speaker, very soon we'll be introducing to the Cabinet what is known as the National Energy Transition System, strategy. Then NETS. Then the geothermal energy, Mr. Speaker, has taken off earnestly. Public consultations are taking place, and we are hoping that once we have completed the public consultations, we will begin the exploratory drillings to determine the content and the volume and the capacity of the energy from the geothermal. Wind development, Mr. Speaker, a lot has been said. A lot has been said about the great work that the former administration has done, and we have squandered the opportunity. As my colleague said, the market is open. It is open to allow anyone who may wish to participate to participate. At the end of the day, the government is committed to fulfilling its energy needs. Wind, Mr. Speaker, we have been in conversation and negotiations with the private developer, and not too recently he was here in St. Lucia, during which we had a conversation and we arrived at certain conclusions, for which a memo is going to Cabinet for final determination to do with the acquisition of lands for the wind farm in the east of the country. The street lighting program, Mr. Speaker, yet another program that we have been accused of abandoning and throwing away and squandering money offered by the CDB. Mr. Speaker, it is one, I didn't say you did, you said it, I said we have been accused. So please don't accept the blame. Mr. Speaker, it was one in which we felt, after analyzing the loan that we've been offered, we felt that it would be better to stop FOMOing, seek grant funding. Otherwise, if that's not possible, we'll return and look at the issue of LED lighting. Let me quickly, Mr. Speaker, conclude by looking at the Labor Department. Mr. Speaker, the Labor Department often diminished in stature by those who place light significance and relevance to its function, role, and services offered in national development, is a critical and powerful department in the governance and in the social and economic development of our nation. The department, Mr. Speaker, in whose hands is placed the well-being of our nation's workforce, has a tremendous responsibility to fill. In this regard, a number of important measures are being put in place to uplift, upgrade, and highlight the Department of Labor. These measures, some of which I will enunciate in a few minutes, are clearly intended to give the Department of Labor greater visibility as it seeks to identify and resolve the problems that are dotted all over the industrial relations landscape in St. Lucia, and to make its services more accessible to both the workers and the employers who have cause to utilize its services. Mr. Speaker, the structure of the department to deliver on its targets is being delivered through a Public Relations and Industrial Services Unit, commonly called PRISU, which deals with labor relations. It is responsible for creating awareness among the workforce. I just heard that we fired a PS, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, PSs can be moved from one department to the other, and the gentleman on the other side understands that better than I do.
Exactly.
Occupational health and safety, Mr. Speaker, is yet another area in the Department of Labor that is important. A department that deals with workplace conditions, environment within which our workers work, to ensure that they're safe and that they are healthy. The employment unit, Mr. Speaker, which is a unit within the department traditionally engaged in the recruitment of workers who primarily participates in the seasonal agriculture worker program in Canada, is yet another important unit within the department as it places young persons and adults in jobs in Canada, but also looks at the potential for jobs in St. Lucia itself and jobs on the international scene. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the work permit unit is a unit which deals with work permits, and it controls employment and processes application. Mr. Speaker, I just want to reflect, to give you some information.
Honourable Member, you have 5 minutes.
Within the next 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker, I have 2 hours of information to deliver. And I do hope you understand and place the elasticity of your watch on the 5 minutes. But Mr. Speaker, moving on. Mr. Speaker, going back to the question of the employment unit, ever since I assumed the role as Labour Minister, I thought that we shouldn't just sit back and rely on tradition in as far as the placement of our workers in Canada. I decided that on every year I shall undertake to visit Canada, to meet with the workers, to get an understanding of their experiences in Canada, to meet with officials of government, and to meet with employers. Mr. Speaker, as a consequence of the 2 visits that I've made to date, here are the results. In 2015, Mr. Speaker, Commonwealth of Dominica had 116 workers earning $1.7 million. Grenada had 45, Montserrat 5, St. Kitts 25, St. Lucia 231, and St. Vincent, our biggest competitor, 236. That was in 2015. In 2016, Dominica 118 workers, St. Lucia 221, St. Vincent 267, outstretching us in 2016. I may quickly to say that this was as a consequence of a Vincentian head in the unit. But in 2017, Mr. Speaker, Dominica had 130 workers, Grenada 91, St. Lucia moved from 221 to 285, and St. Vincent 296, getting closer to St. Vincent. Our earnings, Mr. Speaker, from the 285 workers from St. Lucia in Canada was a net of $4.702 million for those 285 workers. This year, Mr. Speaker, and last year, Mr. Speaker, that number represents, that increase represents a 25% increase in our numbers. And overall, at the sub-regional level, Mr. Speaker, a 20% increase overall in the numbers in the OECS. Mr. Speaker, this year, we have already passed our numbers of last year at this time. And it is projected that we will increase our numbers beyond 30% this year, taking it to a record high ever since the program was started in 1967. Mr. Speaker, this is the work of a working government. This is the work of a united Workers' Party. Let me just quickly, Mr. Speaker, although there are a number of other issues that I would love to speak on, but I'll use the opportunity in future, Mr. Speaker, to make some statements in the Parliament, to address the Parliament, and to give status reports on what we are doing, department by department, to the Parliament of this country. And so, Mr. Speaker, I will close. I will close by quickly running through a few things in the constituency. I have no slides to show, but I have work to show, and people who are moving can see the work that has been done. But, Mr. Speaker, I must take this opportunity to thank once again all my constituents for their continued support and patience through the years. They have, with the exception of once, returned me to office every time I visited the polls. And on this occasion, well, you too, but you know, our performances are much different. Much different. This time, Mr. Speaker, the people of Castries North returned me with a victory margin of 2,346. If you come, you'll get more than that. If you, oh, the Bush doctor, no. Mr. Speaker, but you know, Mr. Speaker, you know, I can give, as I say to my people oftentimes, I can give all the assurance that a lot will be done for them. For unto whom much is given, much is required. And I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I promise to many of my constituents in Sunbelt for this year that negotiations are continuing for the development of the Sunbelt Human Resource Development Center and Sports Complex. In AGAD, we are now in Bocage, yes, we are now trying to finalize the land which will serve both East and North Castries, and also we're looking at the AGAD playing field, Mr. Speaker, where we have placed some temporary lights. We will be putting proper floodlights in conjunction with Looselec to help the young people up there. The lands are there, sir. So we're going to proceed. The HRDC at Chase Gardens, Mr. Speaker, this week work is starting on fencing and some other works. The number of other projects, Mr. Speaker, quickly. BZA, Mr. Speaker, for the Children's Recreation Park, Multipurpose Complex, and Resource Center. In Armandale, a children's playground. In Leclerc, work is continuing or has started and continuing on the fencing of the Leclerc playing field. The minister responsible for sports has promised me that the lights at Leclerc will be improved and to provide LED lighting for Leclerc once the mecca of football in St. Lucia. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I close, I must join others in thanking you for your patience and for your gratitude in stretching the time and giving us the opportunity to make our point and our contribution to this honorable House. I want to thank Mr. Speaker and recognize the work done by my Permanent Secretary at Infrastructure, the DPS Chief Engineer and Engineering team. I must also praise the personnel, my personal assistant and secretary, the staff of the Department of Labor, and as the member for Castries East indicated, we are in a transition stage where one permanent secretary is leaving and another one is coming full of energy to undertake the work of that department. To my constituency team and constituents, my family, particularly my wife, I say thank you for your support through the years. And certainly, without the Almighty God, I praise and thank Him for life, health, and strength. To you, Mr. Speaker, with great confidence, with support and strength, I support the Revenue and Expenditure, rather the Appropriation Bill 2018-2019. I thank you.
Honorable Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs, and the Public Service, and Member for Micoud South.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, let me congratulate you on an outstanding performance. And the manner in which you've conducted the affairs of the House. And I think that it's because of you that we're able to conclude the budget tonight in a reasonable appropriations bill in record time. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for how you think, and I think you've conducted, I think both sides can agree that you've conducted yourself very fairly and very distinguishedly, so it's a welcome to have you here in the House, sir. I will try my best, Mr. Speaker, to address as many of the different issues that were brought up by members on both sides, and hopefully, more importantly, provide some clarity to the general public on some of the statements that were being made, because I think that hopefully I will treat them as questions rather than statements and some of the things that were being said. First of all, the member of Castries East says the Prime Minister has given no indications of the timeline in his presentation. For example, no timeline has been given to the National Health Insurance, and then when this will come into place. And will the NHI come into place this year? And the Prime Minister has committed to moving into the OKU hospital this year, and how will this move be funded? So on page 29 of my budget address, sir, I indicated that we hope to be in a position to institute the NHI before the end of this fiscal year. So we currently have several consultants that are working with us, and we're obviously working with the local parties with the hopes that we can pass legislation and bring this thing to a conclusion by this end of this year and implementing the national health care insurance as soon as possible. And you're 100% correct in your observation, and I think that I also indicated it in my presentation, that government will be undertaking the cost of moving into OKU until the National Health Insurance Program comes in, and that's why you see us moving in stages. And we hope that we can do that and be able to open the hospital by the end of this year, but we will be undertaking the expenses and the cost of moving into the hospital. Talk of renewable energy, but the opposite is done. The government secured a CDB loan for $18.6 million and received a grant for the amount of $300,000 to replace over 21,000 high-pressure sodium light bulbs with LED energy-efficient lights. And this project was canceled. And why was the project canceled, and why was the loan not accepted? So when we came into government, Mr. Speaker, we noticed that we had $100 million of loans from CDB. And that would represent almost a 10% increase in our overall debt. And when we went through those loans, there were several things in which we felt that we should not be using loan financing, even if it was concessionary, when we thought that there could be either private sector involvement or a different way to finance it. So two such projects really was the streetlight program. There are several private sector entities that are prepared to come in and put those lights in and be paid on the savings that we're going to have. And I didn't see why we should be borrowing that amount of money for CDB, and I'd prefer to use that monies for other projects. So while I congratulate the former government on its negotiations, but for us, given that fiscal space is so tight in terms of what our plans are, we wanted to make sure that every cent that we were borrowing, that we ultimately had to borrow that money. The second project was really the dam. And what we were concerned with is, why was the government being asked to give a guarantee when there was a revenue stream already in existence for the silting of the dam? So I'm very grateful to CDB in working with us and recognizing what our policy positions were. And in fact, all we've given is a letter of comfort to CDB on the dam, and we're investigating. I think there's 3 companies that are putting proposals together for us with regards to the lights. Prime Minister's track record for the last year's budget is poor. Have many of these above projects been started or completed? Everybody will recognize that work is ongoing. So I'm very happy that the Fairmont project is already commenced. In fact, all the equipment is on site and the clearing of the site is already commenced. We had a small problem in that the bridge going there was too small and a lot of the equipment could not make it there, but we've now hopefully resolved that issue. The member from Castries East, Mr. Speaker, also talked about the equipment from Sabusha, from GP Group, and talked about land being cleared at VG. And it's an interesting situation in that they have actually bought the land. And so they're actually in the process of building another property on that site. My understanding is that they're going to be building office space as well as building a hotel called a Loft is the brand that they're going to be doing there. And we're also finalizing discussions with them with regards to the Marriott Courtyard at Point Seraphim. So the equipment was being used for their project. And so that's the answer to that question. In terms of the Ritz-Carlton project, you know, the members on the other side keep bringing up this issue with regards to the CIP, Mr. Speaker, and the government's decision to change the deal with Ritz, with Range. And that instead of allowing it to be a real estate project. So how the real estate project works, Mr. Speaker, and also to the general public, is that once a project is certified and approved as a real estate project, that entity is now allowed to sell either shares or to sell an asset in that company. And that person must retain that asset for at least 5 years. And the amount that they have to invest is $300,000. In exchange, they pay an administrative fee of $50,000, and they obtain their passport. The $300,000 goes into an escrow account. So the CIP unit is supposed to approve the conditions for the setting up of an escrow account. So that means that the government must make sure that an escrow is set up that is an arrangement between the developer and the person who is making the investment to determine how the money is drawn down. So we're actually in the process of putting that in place now. So it was amazing to me that that had never been done. So the term sheet as to how the escrow account was supposed to be set up. So once that money goes in, the government only gets the administrative fee. We get nothing else. We get the project at the end of the day. So we felt that we were not ready yet for the real estate program. I had real concerns with the real estate program in terms of how it was being set up. And so by allowing the Range now to do it through a donation, and what we said is whatever clients that he's able to influence to come to St. Lucia, we will allow those funds to go into an account in Invest St. Lucia and to be lent to the developer. And so here's the fundamental difference. When it is lent to the developer, at the end of the project and after the money is repaid, the contribution that the person made, the $100,000, comes back to St. Lucia. Versus in the real estate portion, the money that the $300,000 that goes in, we never see it again. That money goes into the developer, and the developer determines how he or she is going to spend that money. So it's a fundamental principle difference, but I recognize that we're going to have to do it both ways because a fair amount of the CIP programs are being driven through the real estate portion. People like the idea because it's much cheaper because they're supposed to get their money back. And so it is very competitive in that regard. We are in discussions with Range in possibly allowing for a blend, meaning part loan and part in the real estate portion. But really what drove the difficulty with Range was our fault. So there are aspects of the CIP program that we have been struggling with. And the biggest aspect, Mr. Speaker, has been on background checks. The process that was set up was that we went through two different departments in the Ministry of Security. So both the CID unit was getting applications and also special branch. And the CID unit was dealing specifically with a group out of Trinidad called Impacts, and the special branch were dealing with GRCC out of Barbados. And we were really struggling in getting conclusive decisions. And so sometimes we found that CID was approving and JRCC was not approving, and vice versa. A lot of times reports were coming back to us in which both entities said they couldn't identify the individuals. And we certainly took that as being that we could not approve the application. Now, in addition to the regional security programs that we have, we also have what's called third-party background checks. So the third-party background checks are independent companies that actually do work on the ground to find out who these people are. So they actually use their offices in wherever city those people are, and actually take photographs of their home. They confirm that they're actually working and the information that's on the application is correct. So we've been learning how to be able to use the third-party reports along with the security reports to be able to make a more educated decision. But being novices at this, Mr. Speaker, that we really were erring on the side of caution. And so the very unfortunate situation in which we had to revoke 5 passports that were issued, we had originally received approval on those individuals. And so those individuals were sent their letters to say they were given approval, and then weeks later to find out that they were then rejected. So it wasn't even to say that we got a yellow on them. We did receive a physical letter approving them. And that's where the conflict came between JRCC and Impacts. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that we're going to have to review that process. But also, I think that as solutions, we should recognize that if somebody's applying to be a citizen here, and no fault of theirs, that they're rejected for whatever reason, because it could be a multitude of reasons why they're rejected, I think having to publicize those people's names, which is in fact the regulation now, is something that we would have to give serious consideration to, because none of the other islands do that. But in our case, we have, and it is something, my understanding is that the CIP board themselves will be reviewing. So I want to say that we have seen in the last several weeks that the process time has sped up significantly, and members are right to recognize that there were 259 applications and that we only have $21 million, and there obviously is a disconnect. But we cannot report the money from the Ministry of Finance until the Ministry of Finance has received the money. And CIP cannot transfer the money until it's received the money. So until the application is actually approved and they're sent the letter, and then the monies are then transferred to CIP, which are then sent to us. And I want to alert all of us that we've also been in default. Because right now, the way that the CIP was set up, Mr. Speaker, was that we have what's called an Economic and Development Fund, Diversification Fund, in which the monies are supposed to be transferred. And we had argued when we were in opposition that there was no regulations to that fund. And in fact, there's still no regulations, and we're actually in the process of drafting them right now. So really, in the absence of the regulations, technically, CIP should not even be transferring the monies to the state. So we put everybody that we have been doing that, but we are going to rectify that by coming with an amendment to the regulations to add the piece with regards to the regulations for the Economic Fund, which will really dictate that empowers the fund to receive the monies, and also in terms of how the fund is going to disperse the fund. So even the ability of transferring the monies from the fund to invest right now, because there is no regulations, was the inability. And because of those administrative difficulties, we have had to put a pause on the Ritz-Carlton project, and we're hoping that in July that the developer and ourselves are going to be able to re-sit back down to restart the project. But I want to say it was no fault of the developer what had transpired. It was all our responsibility. I take full responsibility for it, but I believe that we're well on the way to turning this thing around and being able to recommence the project. And as I say, you know, I think that the true definition of relationships with investors is when you have those hard times, and in terms of how you're able to be dealing with them. So I really want to thank Range in particular for how they've handled this situation, and I am looking forward to getting this project restarted as soon as possible. And in terms of the other projects, they're all on stream. In the case of the Rex property, Rex, as you know, the Rex solution has closed, and they're pending to close down Papillon. My understanding is that Rex, who are moving aggressively with one company, are considering 2 options. My understanding is that they're going to be here very soon to let me know how they've proceeded. We have sent them off all their incentives, and we're looking forward to getting that project started as soon as possible. The Sandals project, Mr. Speaker, is also due to start very soon. All the geotechnical studies have been done. My belief is that the planning approval has been finally given. My understanding is that the landings and the ownership of landings are a bit concerned about the development. I'm hoping that we can get that situation rectified. But I am looking forward to the commencement of that particular project as well, Mr. Speaker. In terms of a credit bureau, a national consultation has been bringing in all stakeholders together to obtain feedback, and Cabinet will review proposals and make a decision on how to proceed with the credit reporting system during this financial year. The simplification of PYE, the policy is at a very, very advanced stage. In fact, there's been several presentations to Cabinet, and we're looking to be able to make an announcement this year as to the commencement of PYE. On top of that, we have also a review of the corporate tax situation, but members would also appreciate, as the member from Castries South has alluded, in that we are in dialogue with the OECD, with the Europeans, with regards to our entire financial practices, and our corporate tax particularly is going to have to make sure that it's not out of sync with our IBC Act. And so we're waiting to have those conversations before we make any formal announcements. Public Financial Management Bill, members will recall that it did come to the House and that we agreed with the member from Vieux Fort South that we form a subcommittee of Parliament. Unfortunately, that committee, Mr. Speaker, has not met, so maybe we could lean on your good office to assist in making sure that we schedule that meeting as quickly as possible in order we can get their input and hopefully come to the House with a final position on it. The debt management strategy, in my budget address on page 48, I stated very clearly what the government's debt strategy is, and I would urge the members to review it. In the interest of time, I will not want to repeat this at this time. Mr. Speaker, a number of projects were highlighted, and I think I've brought up that. The various project programs are various stages of development, Mr. Speaker, and we are looking forward to move very quickly. The need for further explanation on the difference between the revenue from CIP passports and the amount of money received. Hopefully I've addressed that, but please let me comfort members that if in fact the passports were approved, the citizenships were approved, as I know they were, and we had received the money immediately, we actually would have exceeded the $43 million target that we had. But even with the $21 million, we are 260% higher than we were the previous year. So I'm not so sure how the members on the other side would even suggest that our CIP program has been a failure. When you want to compare St. Lucia to St. Kitts, and St. Kitts, if I'm not mistaken, has been in the business for almost 25 years, has over 12,000 citizenship programs, that kind of rolls over itself. And the member from Castries South is very, very smart to have made the point that when they decreased the price to $150,000, it really stimulated the sales. So the fact is that even some of the more established products out there are now having to discount or find a new market level because there's a tremendous amount of competition now in this CIP program. The estimates have no allocation with respect to the capital of youth development and sports, but over $1 million spent on consultants. Why is there no allocation for the capital of youth development? Members would recall that I provided an explanation for this query during the debate of the estimates. However, I will once again provide some clarification. Expenditure on sports is not zero, neither has it disappeared. Instead, certain recurrent activities were correctly reclassified as recurrent expenditure, so that these will continuously form part of our intervention and support in the area of sports, meaning that we're not treating it as a capital project. This is not something that is up to be renewed every year. We believe that this need to be vested simply in our recurrent expenditure. So sports equipment, supplies, and material at $100,000, maintenance and operations of playing fields to $100,000, youth development and elite athlete assistance program, $300,000, and surely members of opposite will agree that this is a more appropriate classification for this type of expenditure. The member from Denry North, querying once again on what is going on in the distress fund. This should be reinstated, sir. As I explained, Mr. Speaker, the members during the debate on the estimates, provision has been made for these estimates for the emergency situations when they arise. The government, which cares for all its people, will always stand ready to provide assistance to its people during times of emergency. So the money is there, and the request program, the way that you access it is exactly the same. It's in the it was in the contingency fund, yes. Member from Viewfort South, where were the $150 million loans from the Taiwan? I think that the member from Castries North hopefully addressed that, in that $100 million is going to be going through SLASPA. SLASPA is the one that will be taking on that loan responsibility, and they will report it through their traditional mechanisms. And the $50 million will be coming through other financing, the roads, etc. This will be reported once the loans are executed and pursuant to the Finance Administration Act of 1501. The Minister of Finance will be required to seek the authority of this Honourable House by resolution prior to the disbursements of these loans. Accordingly, members will have the opportunity at that time to get more information. Viewfort North Water Supply Project, did the government of St. Lucia cancel the loan from the CDB for the project which was already approved? And if so, why was this done? Mr. Speaker, I don't know why the member continues to mislead the House. On page 480 of the estimates of expenditure, it is very clear that the source of financing for the Viewfort Water Supply projects is as follows. $1,037,500 in bonds, a CDB grant of $1.3 million, and a CDB loan of $2.47 million, which is a total of $4.834,500 million. Is therefore correct to suggest that the loan was canceled? I'm not so sure it would be. I was really hoping that the member from Viewfort South would be here, because I certainly don't like bringing these things up in his absence. He made a statement, and if I can make a document to the House. There's two separate documents, sorry. So I'm going to beg everybody's indulgence, and Mr. Speaker, certainly if you remember, and if I'm in any way misleading the House, I would like to be corrected. The member gave a presentation with regards to the tax, the airport tax, and indicated and used an example of a flight from St. Lucia to Antigua to indicate that we actually were collecting, I think it was $140 US that he indicated that we were collecting. So what I've provided for the members is an online from LIAT, which gives the breakdown of all the taxes. And I think that, again, and I wouldn't expect the member from Viewfort South to be that okwa with the airline business. But the taxes, you can't take the tax from St. Lucia to Antigua and just double it and think it's going to be the same taxes from Antigua back to St. Lucia. So that's the first mistake. So the taxes, when you calculate them, and everybody will see them for themselves in the calculation, is that on a return ticket that you will end up paying $93.90 in taxes to Antigua, and you'll end up paying $83.73 in taxes from St. Lucia. So this is a very, very important point. US dollars, right? But previously, the tax that we would have paid in St. Lucia would have been the $25 plus the VAT of the $13.75. Whereas Antigua would have been paying the $93. And so here's the question. Why would St. Lucia continue to be the cheapest place when it wasn't benefiting us? So everybody else had raised their taxes. And everybody's raised their taxes on average in the Caribbean to $85. And we felt that we were falling short. And so that was tax revenue that was foregone. And the question is, did LIAT, when we were at $25, put on more flights to St. Lucia? Or did they make it cheaper to come to St. Lucia? Did we see any intrinsic benefit because of that? And even when we apply it to the international flights, when you compare St. Lucia to Antigua from New York, the airfare was exactly the same airfare from New York to Antigua as it was from New York to St. Lucia. So the question becomes, Mr. Speaker, the rest of the money, who is getting it? Now, I know that the members on the other side understand that to some extent, but they have been playing naive and dodging the issue to the general public. They have been trying to convince everyone, Mr. Speaker, that when they were going to do the airport project at Hunora International Airport, that they were getting it for free. Okay? Because it wasn't going to cost them anything, and they were not even going to have to take on the debt responsibility. So how did they do that? They appointed a third party to what we have called a special purpose vehicle, meaning that they now run the airport for a prescribed time. I think the time that was in the deal with the IFC was 30 years. And as you see by what we brought to the House, is that they had already approved increasing the tax by $55. So that entity, in addition to running our airport, was going to be given $55 of our tax money per passenger. Right? Huh? What happened? They keep the money and they run it, and they gave you a promise that what they were going to do is repatriate you money once they make profit. But I can tell you this, they'll never make profit, because they would have increased all the cost and find all kinds of different fees, and they would have eaten up that $55. Yes. No problem. Have no problem. Okay? But the fact is, that's what was going on. So, Mr. Speaker, we have no interest on this side, because the question that we asked was, what's the added value? If in fact $35 was more than going to cover the cost of the load, in fact the $35 is going to generate 20% more money than we really needed, why would you go and give them 55? Okay? That you're going to go to 55. So when you go to the $55 million, we are saying 35. Right? And the goal is that we now can get access to that extra $20. That extra $20, we're saying, let's put that extra $20 into the highway, that north-south highway. Or let's put the $20 in investing into the cruise ship terminal. But we're getting more for it. Why would I give a third-party entity who I'm questioning what added value are they bringing, other than we can say we don't have to carry the debt? So what we have done is we've gone out and negotiated in order to be able to get a loan in which SLASPA can get the loan. Okay? There's not going to be any government guarantee on the loan. SLASPA will be taking the loan. And that we have passed in this House the ability for SLASPA to allocate parts of the $35 or the full amount of the $35 to pay back for that loan. Now I want to bring in another subject, because the member from Vieux-Fort South also talked about, why would the Taiwanese government give us a $150 million loan? When we were in opposition, we said that we felt that we needed to change our relationship with the Taiwanese. And that this idea that we're only a one-way relationship in which the Taiwanese were giving us monies for the CDP on an annual basis. We want to see more investment from Taiwan. We want to create more opportunities for Taiwanese businesses to do well in St. Lucia. So that's why we've now negotiated a double taxation treaty. We've also been able to negotiate, Mr. Speaker, for St. Lucian manufacturers to be able to export their products to Taiwan duty-free. And we're now doing many more investment trips to try to get now more Taiwanese companies to invest, and also in particular in agro-processing. And we want to be able to develop a stronger relationship with Taiwan. And what we're saying to Taiwan is we want to be of strategic importance to you. We want you to know that we are a foothold in the western part of the world for you. And we want to be able to be used as a portal to be able to support your businesses in America, in Canada, in Central America, and Latin America. And if we in fact have projects, and given that you're a friendly government, we would like to see you lend the money. And in turn, that you can use your construction companies to be able to get the job. And so that is the exchange. That's the secret. You know what it is called? Mutual respect. That's what it's called. And it's called about a win-win situation. And it's to stop living off of aid. Stop living off of aid. Let's find the way in which we can make sure that people who are making a contribution to us, that we can look them in the eye and we know that they're getting a benefit as well. And that benefit is not about diplomacy. Our diplomacy should never be for sale. But that's the part that many people don't understand with Venezuela. I respect Venezuela for being an independent country. I respect Venezuela for some of the programs that they have done. But as a friend and as a person who supports democracy and the rule of law, I cannot support what's taking place in Venezuela. And I would certainly hope that if St. Lucia acts that same way, that our other brothers and sisters would act the same way. And as I said, from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I am surprised on the other side that given what's taken place in the opposition in Venezuela, that they would support that. Can you imagine if we even thought of doing that in this country, Mr. Speaker? And we support the sovereignty of the people of Venezuela as well. We believe that there has to be a local solution to the problem, but it does not take away from the fact that if you have to call a spade, if a friend in our region who is signed up to an accord that says that we are going to recognize and practice democracy and the rule of law, and they break that, you must say so. I think that China, why do you support China? Huh? The whole world supports China. So, sir, when we talk about the need for health care insurance in this country, Mr. Speaker, and why would we do that? And when I hear members on the other side say that they're going to, and I love to hear that, they're going to run on a platform that if they get into government, they're going to provide universal health care insurance. Universal health care. But they couldn't even open the hospital. Their own studies. In fact, I was so grateful. I was so grateful to the member for Castries for providing us with these two documents. Because it only just reconfirms everything that we were saying. You know, in it, Mr. Speaker, on the last page, it talks about what's the additional recurrent cost for the spending request. So in order for us to be able to open ONK would cost $73 million. And these are numbers that were done in 2015. They have here budget estimates for 2016 moving forward. Yeah, I've read it, right? The note says assumed opening date is September 2016. Seven just for that year. The next year would be the 72.870 million, and then it increases slightly to $73 million for 18-19. That's not what it says? No. I'm sorry if you can't read your own document. You all have the document. The document here says, Mr. Speaker, the document says 2016-2017 budget estimate, and it's projecting here. It says that we're going to open up in September of 2016. So if you open up in 2016, it remains a budget year until to March 31st. And so therefore, that period of time would cost $7,316,000. The following year, the full allocation would now come on for the year, and the full allocation is $72 million. Sorry? Well, I'm going to get there. Yeah. So the assumption to you, Mr. Speaker, and also to the general public, the assumption here is that they're estimating that to run Victoria is $35 million. And so therefore, by closing down Victoria, that we're going to save that $35 million, okay, and move it into, to cut in half. So we're still the $40 million short, right? So where were they going to get the $40 million from? And they said, remember, They're not going to tax the general public. What they're going to do is they're going to provide universal health care. You know where they're going to get the money from? They were going to increase the NIC contribution. So the NIC contribution was going to go from 10% to 15%. So that's a tax. He's right. The insurance premium is a tax. Okay? Right? No new taxes for this budget year. All right, for this budget year. Okay? But so is an NIC contribution. And here's the fundamental difference, Mr. Speaker. The fundamental difference between the two issues, and I'm speaking slowly because it's an important point to be able to make, is that if you make the NIC contribution, all we do is give government the money, and then government can pay the bills at the hospital. But the people who could not afford health care today, under that new system, will not be able to afford health care tomorrow. They will only be satisfied knowing that there's a better hospital. But they're in no better position because the government is not going to be any closer to being able to provide that universal health care. That money that you're going to get from NIC is not going to be able to provide enough money to do that. Whereas when you now give people insurance, the difference is, and again, this is a fundamental difference between the Labour Party and United Workers' Party. United Workers' Party believes in putting money back into people's pocket. So it's not just about the physical ching, ching, ching. It's about the ability that the money is in your pocket and you choose how to spend it. And so when you get an insurance card, that's like putting money in your pocket. You get to decide which doctor you want to go to. You get to decide which hospital you want to go to. Okay? And you never have to worry about whether you can afford it or not. But the way the Labour Party wants it, the universal health care system they're looking for, is one in which the state will never be able to meet the full demands of the people. And therefore, somebody has to play God. Somebody has to be that decision maker to decide who is going to get and who is not going to get. And again, it becomes this issue of going to beg politicians. That's not what this government is about. Even when you now look at the NICE program, what was a NICE program? That you're going to set up a structure in the Prime Minister's office outside of the Public Service Commission, and one man making the decision as to who you're going to hire, and you don't even respect the people enough. You give them a one-year contract. Why? Is it because they have to come back and beg you every year? So every year you get to evaluate as to how loyal they were? Why would you leave yourself open to that form of criticism? Why wouldn't you hire the people through the Public Service Commission? Okay, that's the difference. That's the difference. And they put people, nobody was fired from the NICE program. Your own program. You know, Mr. Speaker, the opposition keeps on saying that we fired the NICE workers. Repeatedly, the contracts came to an end, and the program came to an end. And we changed the program to the National Apprenticeship Program. And you know, the member from Castries East made the point, and he brought up that we have $7 million last year going to Ojo, and $10 million this year going to Ojo. The money is not all going to Ojo. Whatever people get employed in Ojo for the first year and a half that we're going to contribute in the first year, 1,000 EC dollars towards the people they employ. The next thing that we're going to do is after the first year, we then pay for another 6 months. They get paid $500. And that's for all the new workers for the first 3 years. And that's in order to give an incentive to create more jobs for young people so that we are helping subsidize the training. I would rather them train the person. And look what a fantastic job they've been doing, Mr. Speaker. Why can't, for once, the opposition just acknowledge a good project? You sit on one side, Mr. Speaker, and say that we need to diversify from tourism. Here we are diversifying. This is an industry that didn't exist in St. Lucia. We've created the industry. We had to convince the people to come and invest in St. Lucia because Austin and other places were offering them even bigger incentives. But because of their confidence, not in Alan Shastney, I don't want to take that credit. It was their confidence in the young people of this country. That's why they came here. And how did they know about that? Because they owned the company Yodo. And they had been employing young people here, 150 of them a year, who excelled and said they knew that capacity was within the young people of this country. And I support those people. So this idea that my government is a government that doesn't support the young people, that we are a government that only supports foreign investors, let's go back and get a little exercise on economics. And you know what? On one side, I am not celebrating the Nobel laureates. But on the other side, they're not listening to the Nobel laureates. Because Sir Arthur Lewis's policy was based on what? Economic development by invitation. What does that mean? In order to expand the capacity of your country, you need to be able to get new investment. Okay? And it's to encourage foreign investment in your country. Foreign investment does not compete against your local investment. Foreign investment allows the capacity of your country to grow. So when we get some bigger hotels in St. Lucia, who benefits? The taxi drivers benefit because there's more people to carry. The farmers benefit because there's more people to feed. More people, more staff going back and forth from transportation. More money in circulation. More tours being offered. But guess what the big winner is? All those solutions we want to be able to help through village tourism, that we want to hold their hand and create an incubator system in order to develop them more. They benefit because the cost of traveling to St. Lucia comes down. The cost of bringing goods to St. Lucia starts coming down because you start creating some critical mass. The contribution to those companies are making to our utility companies now makes it cheaper because there's more money in circulation. So the fact is that the growth of your international market and your business and your investment is in order to be able to facilitate growth in your local market. But you see, that's the problem. They always miss that part out. And as the member from Castries Southeast showed, here they are criticizing sandals and playing politics with something they know better about. Because guess what? It's an easy thing to do. But hidden in the dark corners of cabinet, they approved incentives even to a greater degree than what had. But that's the duplicity that we've come to expect from the Labour Party. The idea is that the Labour Party continues to say that we want to stop them from speaking. Mr. Speaker, that's the furthest thing from the truth. In fact, we want to encourage them to speak. We want them to be able to encourage them to participate. But what we would like to be able to do is when we come to this House, and we're going to conduct the business of the people, let's put politics aside for once. Let us be able to celebrate something that's done well. And when we talk about the European blacklist, you know, I would have expected from the leader of the opposition, because there were times when I was in opposition and I called him on issues of international, and I said, we will not say anything. We will take the lead of the government. To suggest to anybody that our government implemented any kind of policy that caused us to be on the list is ridiculous, okay? It's absurd, and it's disingenuous. In fact, Mr. Speaker, irresponsible. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the process started in January of 2016. They were still in government. And the first contact after January 2016 was made in the summer of 2016. And then we were given 3 weeks to be able to sign a letter. So I want to say there was no policy of ours. In fact, the EU, I'm still trying to figure out why the EU, Mr. Speaker, is involved in this process. Because this is a process that the G20 countries assign to the OECD. And in fact, we have been working, in fact, the opposition when they were in government also were working with OECD through their issues. These are the same issues. So on one hand, I have every right to say to the Europeans that I don't agree with the process. How can you accuse people of things without proving that they're wrong and putting them on a blacklist? It's almost like you're threatening people. But yet you come from a country in which you practice the rule of law and democracy. So St. Lucia is not the only one to voice that objection. We all have. And we're going to continue to voice that objection. But in the meanwhile, I recognize the power of the European countries. And if they put you on a blacklist, you have to respond. And so I very much look forward to being able to work through this process. Look at our IBCs, our incentives, our free zones, all of these things, because I don't believe that we're doing anything to harm European taxation. But in the next year, we will be able to resolve that. We've given a timeline to go through the process, and I look forward to being able to deliver on that. Another thing that the opposition keeps bringing up is the National Trust. And so I want to, while I've made it myself hopefully clear, but I could never repeat it enough times, Mr. Speaker. In our deliberations with the National Trust, it became very obvious that the National Trust had become very comfortable in its position, and that it has a lot of assets in which it's generating no revenue off of those assets. And so in my discussions with them, we'd ask them for what their plan is. And the National Trust gave us a plan in which they were proposing to build a conference facility on Pigeon Island. So where the museum is, they wanted to convert that into a museum and a conference facility. They wanted to expand a shop at the beginning of the gate, and they also wanted to move their offices to Pigeon Island. So my government opposed that. We felt that that was not going to generate any money, and that there were better ways and better things that they could do to generate the money. And so therefore, we had a meeting with them, and we agreed that we would take away the subvention, because the subvention is not supposed to be used for recurrent expenditure. And we've made it very clear to the National Trust. In fact, I had the opportunity of meeting the new board and reiterated our position. Any capital projects that they have in which there can be a shown rate of return on it, then we will support them. If they are critical projects that have to be done, that are deteriorating or causing the destruction of any of our assets, in the famous words, our patrimony, we will be very happy to help support that. So I think there's a project we're working on at Sir Arthur Lewis to be able to fence the area. As it pertains to the Derek Walcott, you know, I believe that the people that really are at fault are the opposition, because the opposition went and made all kinds of promises to the National Trust about how they were going to build this facility and promising them all the money. I have no idea where that money is coming from. Okay, $14 million. Right? So the only amount of money that we saw from the Taiwanese, I think, was like $2 or $3 million that we saw allocated to the project. So I don't know where the rest of the money, the $10 million, was supposed to come from. It was a phased project, but nobody had the money. So it was very, very similar to what was taking place at the St. Jude's Hospital. So let me move to the St. Jude's Hospital. Again, I assume this has already been made a copy of the document of the House, and I can make reference to it. So if I can go to page 18 on point 2. It says that the project was initiated as a result of an emergency aid and did not go through the normal project development cycle of similar, page 18, projects, which is historically 5 to 10 year period prior to the physical implementation. This resulted in the initial policy direction of a basic renovation of the old site and a new development of a new one through a public-private partnership. The International Finance Corporation of the World Bank was engaged to work with the government to facilitate the financing and implementation of a new facility. The IFC counterpart, Ms. Michelle Otti, initially both short and medium-term solutions were being implemented simultaneously. Project implementation commenced on the original site in September of 2010 with minimal funding to facilitate only the short-term solution. I think that was Mr. King, the minister, the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance at the time, had agreed to, was to just rebuild what had been burnt down. The technical work. The planning and design of the construction had to be undertaken simultaneously by breaking up into subcomponents, which is not normally the preferred mode of implementation, but this was necessary in an effort to progress quickly. So you remember that our members on the other side, Mr. Speaker, continued saying, we kept working. Okay? And you had the member from Laborie who started off at $36 million one year and ended up at $136 million, $175 million by the end of it. Because you know what they were doing? They were just working. I'll be happy. The change in policy direction in August of 2011 resulting in replanning exercise to facilitate the permanent reoccupation of St. Jude Hospital. However, financing was not available to meet the requirements of this new direction. As such, the PMU developed a strategy to disaggregate the outstanding works into smaller components and into thematic areas to qualify for targeted sources of funding, such as water and wastewater components, renewable energy components, medical equipment components. This resulted in the project management unit preparing various proposals for funding, i.e. to the Mexican government, the German government, the World Bank, the United States government, and Taiwanese government. Construction on site from 2010 to 2014 was directly related to the limited funds available through government of St. Lucia. I want to keep going. It says, during the period of 2012 to 2015, the availability of funding dictated the pace of works on the ground. Despite the request by the project management unit for adequate financial resources to progress work on the site, this is 2012 to 2015. Funds were made available were inadequate, and work on site was restricted to approve funds for the respective financial years due to budgetary constraints. Now, I have to say to you, is if I found myself in that position, what I would do is open up what I can open and focus the resources, the limited resources, on at least building a facility that you can cause the people to have moved over from where they were over here. But you know what? 5 years went by, and they kept working. But it wasn't really working, it was spending. There's a difference between working and spending.
Honorable Prime Minister, let me just advise you, according to the standing order, you have 10 minutes left.
The PMU advised the consultant Halcro Group Limited on the available budget for the respective years. The consultant was charged with the responsibility to identify a feasible scope of works out of the overall scope of works to match the available funds. As such, although more work could have been progressed in the period, the work completed was restricted to the contracts issued based on the available funds. So if I can speed up and go to page 23, the last paragraph. Proposals were received from the Accreditation Canada for the commencement of the accreditation process, which was scheduled for January-February of 2017, based on January 2017 hospital transfer. So you have one document that said that we're going to move in July of 2016, and now we have another document that said that we're going to be moving in February. Yes, half an hour.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to invoke section 4210 to 3210 to allow the member for Mikud South an additional half an hour to complete his presentation.
Honorable members, the question is that Standing Order 4210 be invoked and to grant the Prime Minister and member for Mikud South an additional 40 minutes in which to complete his presentation. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Thank you. I'm going to be quick because I know that some members are tired. We've been here for 3 days. Also, proposals received from the Accreditation Canada to assist the St. Jude Hospital with the development of the relevant policies and procedures and procedure manuals. This activity was scheduled to commence in July of 2016. Accreditation Canada also assisted in identifying a suitable contractor to assist St. Jude Hospital with the transfer from the stadium to the new facility. Dr. Poit has been reviewing this and has signed off on the relevant proposals. The development, here's where the interesting part becomes now. But you're the one who made it the public document. Well, I know, but I'm just glad for the transparency. Point 13, the Development Control Authority approval. From the inception of the project, the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Physical Development, Mr. George James, was written to, I need the copy, appraised of the project, and a request was made for the assignment of an officer to support throughout the process of seeking approval. This process of seeking approval was deferred as initially basic renovations were being done, not resulting in an increase in the existing footprint. So let me explain what that means. When the project was originally started, because it was not going to be expanding the project, but just really retrofitting what had been burnt and fixing it up and modernizing it, there was not a necessary for planning approval. But it's when the project now changed in scope in August of 2011, once you did that, the plans had to be submitted and given for planning approval. This process of seeking approval was deferred. As time progressed and the new policy direction was being affected and the associated funding became available, Halco Group Limited proceeded to work with the various referral agencies to ensure review and approval of the facility. When the project phases had been confirmed and it was clear which components had been financed, final approval was sought. The approvals were received from the referral agencies, fire service, health department, etc. Subsequent to this, the final submission was made, including all relevant and referral agency approvals. The application was recommended for approval. However, the Ministry of Physical Development informed that the board has requested a presentation to the project to the approval. The PMU has agreed to the presentation and was awaiting information on its schedule. So, on April 22nd, 2016, I'll be happy to make this a document to the House. The Development Control Authority wrote to the then PS and basically said the Development Control Authority considered, now remember, that's April 2016. This project has been going on since 2010. Yeah. And they came in end of 2011. Kindly be informed that on April 20th, 2000, the Board of DCA deferred your application pending resolution of the following. A presentation by the Planning Department of Ministry of Finance on the proposal. Submission of air conditioning and circulation system indicating ventilation solutions for all the rooms, including the ground floor for toilet and the dialysis building, ground floor toilet warehouse, toilet 103 ambulance and monitoring building, toilet washroom 203 and morgue building, toilet 201 in the gym, the first floor toilet 102 and 105 and male and female washrooms and floor houses. Several of the ground and first floor east wing, several on the ground and the first floor surgical wing, first floor room 312 dormitory west wing, ground floor kitchenette and warehouse. Landscaping plan is to be provided. Site plan to be amended to reflect the following. All carriageways to be dimensioned a minimum of 18 inches for the two-way traffic. All parking bays to be dimensioned to DCA standards, but they weren't. And that's the problem, they weren't. Setbacks to be included from the furthest most project of the building. So all I'm saying to you, this list goes on, and I'm going to save everybody the time, because the member from Castries East is making the point. He's saying that if we knew this, and if I'm misquoting you or misinterpreting you, please let me know, why would we have had to do a study? Because these are the things, sorry. Do what? Okay, so when we read the reports, and clearly we understood that all that was happening is that people were trying to progress the project. So to figure out where we were, and not only that, the things that were pointed out in the DCA, Mr. Speaker, were only things that were obvious to the naked eye. And so when we actually did the study, we discovered a lot more problems. And the fact is that the United Workers' Party and our administration as a cabinet, and I want to say this, as a cabinet, because this wasn't a decision by any one minister. This came to cabinet. And the collective mindset of all these men and women here said, you know what? Stop. Get an assessment. Let us figure out what the full merit is going to be and how we're going to make this work for the people in the South. So once, You know, that's another interesting thing. Why was the things in other people's places? Why would the government of St. Lucia buy items and then allow and cause people to have the things not in their possession? And they had already paid for the items, Mr. Speaker, but that's for another day. So, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about, let me just continue right here. Where is it? If I can go to page 27, another interesting thing. VAT. Follow up on the ministry's decision with respect to the payment of VAT. It was previously indicated that VAT legislation was going to be amended to cater to VAT due to government projects. I'll get there if you want me to read it. In the interim, a letter needs to be furnished by the ministry of the relevant consulting contractor. So here is it that all the projects were VAT liable. In principle, VAT payments are still outstanding for the major contracts, especially payments due to the Customs Department for the clearance of goods imported. But both parties have continuously exempted VAT on construction of hotels and developments. So here we have a project which is really in its infancy, a critical project. Why, even from bureaucracy perspective, tied up? What was the difficulty in just going to Cabinet and saying, let's consider this as a critical development and allow it to be the VAT exempted? But that simple thing could not be done. 2210. Let me. Okay. Equipment and materials in storage. During the implementation of the project, it became necessary to store construction materials and associated equipment. All materials and equipment stored are the responsibility of the relevant contractors until incorporated into the workers or installed. Halcro Group provided the details of equipment and materials in storage on site and off site. Medical equipment procured through the project currently in storage include equipment supplied. I get this, but you're not asking people to hold stuff for 2 and 3 years. And in fact, when we went there, it took forever to be able to get the inventory list as to where everything was. And in fact, things were there and they had spoiled already. So the question becomes, why would you have ordered all of that stuff up front, paid out for all those money for the stuff, if you were not ready to use it? I mean, so that's all the problem is. What it does, it continues to talk about the complete mismanagement that was taking place.
And you pay insurance for the things on site and they are elsewhere. They pay insurance for like 5 million layers of storage and the things that are everywhere.
So, Mr. Speaker, you can see when we use the words that we inherited a mess, we're not in any way over-exaggerating the situation. Even their own reports show, right, that this thing was not being managed properly. And the fact is that when you now start going through the amount of the expenditure, Mr. Speaker, it becomes even more apparent. So when you have members on the other side making all kinds of allegations about accountability of money and how well they are, the people of St. Lucia deserve to have an independent audit done in order there can be a record for everybody to see what has happened. And if in fact somebody has acted irresponsibly with the state's funds and with those donors' funds, then they must be held accountable. That's all it is. That's all it is. I want to make sure I'm getting everything done, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to go to. I want to go, Mr. Speaker, very quickly because, and again, my good friend, the President of the Republic of Laborie, is not here. And he keeps repeating himself that this land that we're giving away to DSH. So let us reiterate the position that the only land that is being leased to the DSH group is the land that's going to be occupied by the horse racing track. The remaining amount of land is going to be sold, and depending on the location of the land, will be sold for either $60,000 US an acre or $90,000 US an acre. Okay? The horse racing track is expected to occupy around 250 acres. So that's what we're talking about. The remaining amount of land, which there's another 300 acres in that area, is going to be sold. The area of land that we're now talking about by Il Pirata is, I think, around 150 acres, no, it's actually 33 acres, if I'm not mistaken. And what we're proposing to do is to be able to reclaim land. Because remember, part of that area in Il Pirata was already reclaimed. Okay? Sorry? No, 200 acres. But you know, what's interesting again, because the member from Dennery North made a point where he said, I don't want to misquote him. There it is. I can. Basically, he was talking about transparency and accountability. So again, this has already been made a document of the House, which is in February 9th of 2016. And remember, the government goes in May, right? Your good friend, Mr. Robert Ainsworth. Right? Absolutely. I mean, I'm happy to read the whole letter. It is a document of the House. I would like to confirm that at a cabinet meeting on February 8th, 2016, it was agreed by the cabinet that upon receiving written confirmation from the Lifestyle Group PLC of the level of the investment being made by it and each of its subsidiaries, incorporated the date hereof, and those incorporated in the future, their joint venture partners' licenses for completion, the entire proposal for the cabinet, including the purchase or acquisition of La Paradis, Lands or DCSG Company, and proof that the medical products you intend to manufacture in St. Lucia meet FDA and or similar standards, you will have the full support of the government of St. Lucia in order to meet your objectives within the proposed framework. Guess how much they were looking to give them? 1,000 acres, you know. In addition, never saw it. Uh-huh. Doesn't matter. But you promised to give him 1,000 acres. It will include the concepts. So what is the difference between selling land to DSH and saying to a person you're going to give them permission to buy land for 1,000 acres? In addition to that, that same person, I mean, what's amazing to me, Mr. Speaker, and that's where I'd like the honesty. If you're going to criticize DSH because they're going to lease 200, or if you want to exaggerate it, 300 acres of land. Okay? 300 acres, not 1,000. Okay? No, it doesn't say that. You see, because you have the wrong agreement. I keep telling you that. But you don't want to listen. No, but you see, there's all kinds of fake news out there. And all I'm saying to you is when the agreement has been formalized, we will make the agreement public so you don't have to worry about that. Okay? Because that's how our government operates. Okay? So we have a framework agreement because we were in negotiations. We are now almost getting close to be able to sign off on our deals, and I can tell you that the intention was always to lease the lands for the horse racing track. I find these proposals, let me get here. What's amazing in this agreement is waivers of personal income tax for the boards and senior management, waiver of corporation tax for the development company, its subsidiaries and anything, approval for the CIP, exemption from all forms of VAT and import duty for the construction purposes, and any of the joint venture partners, nightclubs and sports facilities and private members clubs. I don't know what a private members club is, but anyway. And importation of all and any materials, including but not limited to the building materials, etc. Planning permission for each of the elements of the development will be approved with due dispatch of each submission once the application conforms with the laws of St. Lucia. That the proposed development, where appropriate, will fall within the Tourism Incentives Act. The government will facilitate the establishment of an investment as a CIP-approved investment under the provisions of the Citizenship by Investment. Now, I'm saying all this, and then, you know, the classic one, again, to really talk about the hypocrisy of the opposition, is point 14. The government confirms the rights of the developer to extract and develop the natural resources, if any, that are discovered within the culture of any of the lands owned by the developer and its subsidiaries. And we didn't give it away. We didn't give it away. Doesn't matter. Okay. And DSH is buying land. Yes, they are. You keep saying they're not buying land, but they are buying land. All they're doing is leasing the horse racing track. As indicated above, the government may be deemed it prudent to enact the special legislative provisions. This letter, in its terms, to be kept confidential as between the parties and your intended joint venture. So all I'm saying to you is, when members on the other side want to say things, I'm hoping that the public of St. Lucia will now start seeing them for the bare truth of what they are. They say one thing when they're in opposition and do something completely different when they're in government. We show it repeatedly, over and over and over again. So let me say, I want to wrap up. Why is my government emphasizing growth? Because growth is going to help us build resilience. We have seen repeatedly, year after year, that we've had no growth. The member from my favorite place, Vieux Fort South, made again another statement, Mr. Speaker, and again, if I'm misquoting him, I hope I'm not. He said that in his term that they had growth of up to 3%. Right? Now there's two growth rates. There is what's called growth rates in constant prices and market prices. So the growth rate that we're recording, which is a 2.5%, that's constant prices. Now the World Bank and IMF do it in market prices. So we'll do both. So when the minister within the Ministry of Finance made the quote of 3%, what he was quoting was the market prices. So the market price growth for this year was 3%. Sorry? Yes, last year was in real terms. Market terms, 3.4. And then the year previously to that was minus 0.9%. And then it was 3.6%, minus 0.13%, minus 0.6%. Okay? Now in growth rate that the member from Vieux Fort South congratulated me on using that number was 2.5% this year. Yes. No, in market. No, in constant prices. Constant prices. 2.5% this year. 1.7% last year. 1.8% the year previously. 0.5% before that. Minus 0.2%. 0.7% and 0.8%. So all I'm saying is that our country has not been doing well. In fact, the ECCB has said in order for us to do well, we need 5% per year. At minimum is the target that they've given us. So we must agree that we're not achieving it. So the fact is that the Labour Party, if you go back even to the 10 years previously to them, had, other than 1 year, which was World Cup cricket, and the peak of the world growth is when they did well. Now remember, between 1998 and 2006 was considered to be the fastest growth period in the history of the world. And St. Lucia could not even grow by 1.5%. Okay? We only had 1 year where we had just about, I think it's 5% growth. So, what does bananas have to do with 2000? So, all I'm saying to you is that here we go again, where it's okay for them to lie. It's okay for them, Mr. Speaker, to provide false information. But I'm pleading with the people of St. Lucia to see past what is being said here. That every single dollar more that we have to pay as a country in interest payments is $1 less we have for playing fields, $1 less we have for the healthcare system, for education, and to help our people, and to invest in infrastructure in our country. But they can't understand that. They just keep incurring more and more debt. They need to have surplus and primary recurrent budgets. The ministers, they keep saying that, but they forget that when they get into government, because they never practice that when they're in government. They never do. All they do is just keep rolling over the debt. They don't have a sinking fund. They're not accountable for the money they're borrowing. So when you talk about now having targeted taxes, it's because the people's confidence in the government and politicians is bottom. Nobody has any faith in us. Nobody believes anything that politicians say. They think we come to the House and talk about how much we love and appreciate people, but we do something completely different. So my government came in here based on the need to be realistic and to show people that we're truthful. So we're going to take the gas tax, put it in the lockbox, and we're only going to spend it on the roads. And every year the minister will come from infrastructure and tell you where he spent the money. Okay? No matter where the lockbox is, the money is being spent right now with the minister. It's not being spent on anything else. And it will go into the lockbox as soon as we now confirm the loan for the $50 million. That's where the money is going. No, it was spent $14 million. Agreed. Okay?
And the Marshall Road will be there.
So when you have growth, everybody else benefits. And the economy benefits, and small business people. So now, where is the passion of my government to help local business people? Because that's the cry that we don't. The St. Lucia Development Bank.
And
what we're doing in the marketing board in order to be able to give contracts to farmers. What we're doing in village tourism. What we're going to be doing with TIPA. The improvements that we're going to be putting into the cash-freeze market. What we're going to do in terms of fixing up the infrastructure to allow small business people to survive. But more importantly, by reducing the VAT by 2.5%, all those small business people's costs went down, including their rent. And if we now can grow our tourism product and become more competitive, so I was so happy to hear when the Minister of Tourism spoke about that American Airlines has announced that they're going to put on a second flight, and I'm very happy to report to the House, no MRG, no, from Miami. Yes, so you get to leave early in the morning, and you can come back late in the night. JetBlue will come from Fort Lauderdale as soon as they finish the construction, I promise you that. Because I know you're a JetBlue fan. So, I want to close, and although I tried to find, I don't know where it went to. I think I'm going to spare the member. Oh, here it is. This is the member from Castries East speech. Yes, last year. And Mr. Speaker, I don't want to read everything. I'm just going to read some of the key things. It says, Madam Speaker, this is what he referred to last year's budget. This budget is risky, is dangerous, and is irresponsible deficit budget. It is risky, dangerous, and irresponsible because it fails to deal with the fiscal consolidation. It fails to deal with the realities of the economic situation. It fails to follow on the path that the government inherited when they came into power in June. Who would want to follow the path of failure? I will tell you why, Madam Speaker. Let us look at some of the ratios that are important to the economy, important to the country, important. The government is not a gamble. It's not a business. It's not dealing in shares, and it's not in speculation. When you have a business dealing with shares, there is a silly notion that government is business. Government cannot be business. He then goes on to say, Madam Speaker, No same thing, but the country is overburdened. Too much tax, Madam Speaker. I will challenge the Prime Minister again to tell the public that he's going to do with VAT, because I'm going to provide to you my simple arithmetic, that mathematics, that the yield that the government has proposed on VAT cannot be correct. And if they maintain the same level of goods and goods as exempt goods and at a 12.5%, it is impossible. I'm going to prove that to you later, Madam Speaker. The government has foregone substantial VAT revenue, but they have kept the level of taxation the same. Why did they do so? They taxed the tourism. That is what they did. They taxed tourism, Madam Speaker, and regardless of how they were told the taxing tourism would have an impact on visitor arrival, all the studies show that. I have had discussions with the very important hotelers that are alarmed at the government taxing of tourism. A Caribbean Development Bank study showed that the elastic travel, Madam Speaker, is such that when you tax the tourism, it has an effect on visitor arrivals. The government refuses to understand that, so as to say they are taking a risk. So they are risking taxing on tourism. Now, isn't that funny? And guess what happened? St. Lucia grew by the largest margin for last year with the new tax. But you know why, Mr. Speaker? Because there are people on the other side who keep on pretending they know an industry or understand economics, and they don't. And let me tell you why. Because when you increase the tax, the vast majority of people who come to St. Lucia buy what we call a vacation package. And that package includes the hotel, the airfare, and their tours. So when you take the increase in the tax, Mr. Speaker, it is spread out over a 10-day period. So it's $7.50 per person per day. Where St. Lucia is, that's not going to impact us. Furthermore, the $75 increase, right? The average person spends 10 per person. The average person spends 10 nights. So 10 nights by 7 is $7.50 per person per night. No, I said $7.50 per night per person on an average stay of 10 nights. Furthermore, as I've showed, the other countries are already charging that tax. And the airlines are the ones absorbing that rate. So I knew that there was no way that St. Lucia would be impacted. And in fact, so what we did is we transferred the tax that was being paid by the average man and woman. The people who couldn't even afford it were paying that 15% VAT. We transferred that. That money now went on the gas tax, and it went on to the airport. And revenue that we were not even generating. Now here's the problem, Mr. Speaker. We could have done even better than we did this year. But what happened is people like Mr. Pierre and other people questioned whether in fact we could have lowered the VAT and made up the revenue somewhere else. Okay? Lowering the VAT and increasing the tax on the airlines, they said that we were going to suffer. So what we had to do, Mr. Speaker, is we had to hold aside the revenue that we were generating from the gas tax and also from the airport, and we could not enter into a loan agreement because we agreed that we would hold that money back until we were able to prove that we were able to make up the revenue. So this year, what did it prove? It proved that the elasticity that he and other people were talking about didn't exist, and that fact that St. Lucia's tourism product is much stronger than they thought it was, and that the reduction in VAT, which was supposed to have lost 55 million, Mr. Speaker, only lost 27. And my prediction is with the money that we're going to be spending in capital expenditure over the next 3 years, that $27 million will be eliminated, meaning that still staying at 12.5%, that we will collect as much money as we were collecting when we had 15%. No. I'm comparing like to like. And I want to remind the member, we said we were going to reduce it, eliminate it, and replace it with a less oppressive tax. Yeah, go and look at it. It's right there. But that's the part you didn't want to hear. It's like when we talk about affordable health care and saying that people should pay a contribution for insurance and empower the people of this country. So I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, that we are confident that the plans that we're continuing to implement for St. Lucia will resound to the benefit of everybody in this country, even the opposition. Yeah. And this idea that we're not listening, we are listening. We listen to everybody, but it doesn't mean that we necessarily have to agree. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the people of this country elected this government and me as leader to make those tough decisions. And as I indicated in my independence address, I'm not going to shy away from those tough decisions. I know what it is to make decisions that you don't necessarily have everybody on board. But once people then start feeling the benefit, they quickly understand and support you, and people's confidence will grow with this government. But I have to say to you, Mr. Speaker, before I leave, that there is absolutely no way that I could have accomplished or that we could have accomplished what we have if it wasn't for the team that I have. I want to say thank you to them because we have tough cabinet meetings. I think that everybody takes on their responsibility of recognizing that when we are in cabinet, we're not representing our constituencies, but we are a board, and that we're going to act collectively. And I think that we are gaining each other's trust to know that we're not going to make decisions outside of that cabinet, and that there's going to be consensus. I also want to thank the technocrats and the civil servants that have been working with us. The hard work that they've been. I want to thank the opposition. Okay, because the opposition is doing what they're supposed to do. And as long as the public of St. Lucia recognizes that. And all I'm saying is that when it comes to the opposition, the only difficulty I have sometimes, Mr. Speaker, only difficulty I have sometimes is the hypocrisy. So when they're in government, they do one thing, and when they're now in opposition, they're proclaiming somebody else. And they want people to hold them to a different standard. I wanted to be able to go in, Mr. Speaker, tonight with regard to the Jafali affair. Because there's still things that people don't understand, and that we don't understand. So when the member from Castries South again wants to continue to give me or our party advice, it's always tempered. Because he's the person that introduced Jafali to St. Lucia. And we know he's supposed to be here. He was invited to be here. Supposed to be here. So you can pass the message on to him. But when he was there, I want to know, and the people of this country want to know, what did we get from Jafali? So we know that Jafali was made an ambassador, and he was supposed to do these miraculous things at IMO. He never went to the IMO for the meetings. So when he became the ambassador, in addition to being able to get what we believe was the immunity from his divorce case, the first thing that he did as an ambassador, he was entitled to buy cars. So he bought 2 cars in the UK. He bought 2 cars for himself. Ambassador Jafali. So he bought a car for himself and he bought a car for his wife. So he bought a Rolls Royce for himself and he bought a Maserati for his wife. In addition to that, he used the facilities of the High Commission in order to get 4 diplomatic passports for staff members. So he had 2 Filipinos and 2 Saudis as workers in the house that were facilitated by him being an ambassador. So I'm saying to you, here's a gentleman who got his immunity. He got to buy cars and save thousands of dollars in taxes, and also got the benefit of having his staff. He then turned around and paid for somebody to operate out of the office to work for him. Okay? So the question becomes, where did St. Lucia get what it's supposed to get? The only thing I see that St. Lucia got was wind pies. We got the promise of some kind of investment. So here's a person, Mr. Hilaire, who obviously failed in his due diligence of Mr. Jafali. He failed in his due diligence of Mr. Jafali. Because if he's saying that he did not know he was giving it for his immunity, clearly the evidence suggests that that's what he wanted it for. And the fact that he did nothing and generated nothing, also questions come as to why we gave this man an ambassador position in the first place. And what was the conversations and all this going around in terms of this investment? The next thing is that the member from Castries South, was also involved in Robert Ainsworth. So when you again do a simple due diligence, so here's a gentleman, the gentleman who was going to come and buy 3,000 acres of land in St. Lucia. He was going to build a factory, a pharmaceutical factory, 1,000 acres. He was, 3,000 acres. No, one in Vieux Fort. in order to do the factory. That's what it was. Want me to read it for you? I want me to read, it's 1,000 acres for View Fort. So he had 1,000 acres for View Fort to do a factory. Then guess what the government did? The government then turned around and put the same member in as the chairman of CIP. Okay? So we're supposed to have confidence in this gentleman to do the due diligence. What did he then do? He wants to change it around, but the fact is a fact. He appointed his best friend's wife as a CEO, a person who has no track record in CIP, who has no track record in due diligence.
Honorable Minister, you should summarize now.
No problem. But what did he do? He wants to question the two other people that we put there. The person who is the chairman of the CIP is a person who has developed a development bank, has been an auditor, has been involved in doing due diligence his whole life. And then we have now a CEO who actually was a financial regulator of this country, who worked in a bank with regards to compliance. So those are the same skills that you need for CIP. These are not yes people. These are not people who are associated to any political party. So I just want to end with this, because there are a lot of innuendos that are thrown out to us. So, Mr. Speaker, it seems that the opposition leader has recently discovered a love for alteration. He gave the V word a break this time, his vindictive word, around, and has adopted the F word instead. F for foreigners, friends and family. He seems to have forgotten that F is also for the first letter for the word failure, which is the one they should be more accustomed to, which perfectly defines his party's last term in office. But let's break down the foreigners, friends, and family. The SLP has been cultivating in St. Lucia a hate and a fear of foreigners. The word for particular disease is called xenophobia. You heard them try to scare the people of the South that we are giving away all the land to foreigners. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, they have threatened to warn foreign investors away from St. Lucia because they were not in office. The same thing again tonight. Not only were they threatening foreigners, Mr. Speaker, but again, I didn't catch the last words of the member from View Fort South when he sat down, but it certainly seemed to me that he was again threatening me. But again, I'm accustomed to that, because in the elections, it was not UWP against labor, it was the Shastnys against labor. Personalizing everything, bringing in people in who are not involved in politics. But they don't know better. That's all they know how to do. So they would seek to ruin St. Lucia's image overseas for their own selfish motives. And they wondered why they could not have a successful CIP program. Do they ever think about the damage, the things they say or do to the reputation of the country? Friends and family, the American writer Rich Bosch said that the bond that links your true family is not one of blood, but of respect and joy in each other's life. We all come from different walks of life in St. Lucia. Raised under different roofs, but we're all part of one St. Lucian family. Well, the United Workers' Party considers the people of St. Lucia to be all part of our family. And what do you do for your St. Lucian family? You give them affordable health care. If they are young, you teach them skills and prepare them for the world ahead. It makes me wonder, Mr. Speaker, how does St. Lucia Labour Party see the people of St. Lucia? They are our family and friends. Does that mean that they are your enemies? Then again, these days on the other side of the house, their once sworn enemies have become their friends very quickly. But I respect all the people of St. Lucia are our family, and we will not let you down. Our country will succeed and be resilient, and we will do it together as one St. Lucian family. I thank you very, very much.
Honorable members, The question is that the Appropriation 2018-2019 bill be read a second time. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide for the services of the State of St. Lucia for the year ending on the 31st day of March 2019.
Honorable members, honorable members, clause 2.
Appropriation of $1,487,583,200 for the services of the State of St. Lucia for the year 2018-2019.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Schedule.
Section 2.
Schedule stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Honorable members, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, I beg to report that the Appropriation 2018-2019 bill went through committee stage with no amendments. Honorable member for Mikot South, Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs, and Public Service.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Honorable members, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Appropriation 2018-2019 bill be read a third time and passed. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Appropriation Act 2018-2019.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that the House be adjourned, sine die.
Honorable members, before I put a question, let me take the opportunity to thank you for your cooperation. In my childhood days, I was told that all the time I visited rivers that if you wanted to learn to swim, you just had to jump into the river. And I guess being an elected speaker, I was thrown right away into the deep end of the House of Assembly and being challenged right away by a good friend member for Ancillary Canneries, if you understand what I mean. So I'd like to thank you very much for your cooperation. I would also like to thank the staff of the Parliament for being here throughout. Also to the police officers who keep us safe and provide us security. Also to the staff of the GIS. I'm hoping that honorable members will continue in the good spirit of bipartisanship and as very well, and that both sides of this House will cooperate, not just with me, but with each other. Honorable members, I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion, see, as many as of a contrary opinions, you know, I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. This House sitting adjourned.